It's 6:30. Time to call the Board of Trustees, Lamar Consolidated Independent School District to order. This is our board workshop, and we have a quorum with all members present. So we will begin to review the agenda items for our regular board meeting of August 15th. So Dr. Randall.
Thank you, Madam President. The first agenda item is that we ask that the Board of Trustees approve a continuation of the optional flexible school day program that has been piloted jointly between our high school and 1621. Next item, we ask the Board of Trustees to approve the cooperative agreement and data sharing agreement with the University of Texas at Austin for the on-ramps program with Lamar Consolidated Independent School District. Next item is that the board consider adoption of the 2019-20 General Operating Child Nutrition and Debt Service Fund budgets at the function level in the following amounts. General Operating Fund, $318,648,927. Child Nutrition Fund, $16,468,128, and Debt Service Fund of $73,208,129. And all of that is subject to change as the final calculations are ongoing. And historically, we have done the presentation during the public hearing, unless the board wishes to have that tonight.
It would be both, correct? We would do it tonight.
That's right.
And then again,
yes.
again at 6:30 on Thursday.
On Thursday.
So does a board member need the presentation again tonight?
Okay.
Okay.
The next item, we ask that the Board of Trustees consider adoption by ordinance the 2019 tax rate.
I have some questions.
We have
Yes,
some
ma'am.
questions.
He's the
You do a good job.
custodian.
Okay.
Now, we're dropping the rate, correct?
Correct, the total rate.
Okay. I was writing down some questions because did I understand that we're going to have to go up next year or the following year? We do anticipate having to go back up on this tax rate?
Well, it's hard to tell right now because we don't know exactly what the value growth will be from one year to the next, as far as the debt service rate.
Okay.
We do feel like we can keep the rate at 35 cents. At this point in time, I don't think we're going to have to go up on the INS rate next year. At some point in time, we might have to, depending on value growth and our amortization schedule, and also due to the fact that we're selling the remaining $145 million in bonds. And right now, we don't know what the debt service on the new bonds will be until they're actually sold. So there's a lot of variables as far as debt service. But I feel confident at this point in time the rate will be sufficient.
Okay.
Now, with the M&O side,
Okay.
there is additional tax rate compression that's required, so it'll go down from the 93 cents to another rate. Right now, there's still a lot of uncertainty as far as what that rate's going to be due to the legislative changes, and which is nothing that we have any influence over. So it could be about 92 cents, but then there's some other parameters and things, and I feel like we'll still end up at 97 cents on the M&O side.
Okay. In my head, I go, okay, I'm in the world where everything goes up, nothing goes down. And here we're talking about something dropping, but yet we know it's going to go back up. Why are we going to not be satisfied with keeping it where it was, as is? Do we get, if we had extra money, would that go into like a savings account or something, just in a general discussion?
Well, there's a couple different questions there. For one thing, we have to drop the rate on the M&O side due to the legislative changes.
Okay.
So we don't have a choice on that. And you're right, if values increase, even though the rate increases, there's still some variable, the tax amount is still going to vary. But most taxpayers overall will see a decrease in their total tax.
I guess I just wanted to make it clear that just because we're dropping it, not to have that false grade, because we're smart enough to know it is going to be going up. We just need to get prepared for that.
Right.
And that's what I want my constituents to know, that I have a hard deal for why do we not just leave it? But you answered my question about saying we have no choice.
Right. Well, and this year, our values grew at about 7.5%. Last year, they didn't. So there's so many variables, it's hard to say what will happen from one year to the next.
Okay, I think, and my other question was, our teacher raises, that's going up. We're opening a new elementary school. We're going to open up a new high school, junior high in a couple of years.
Right.
Actually, we have 2 elementary schools coming up.
Right.
That all those expenses are going to increase our expenses, and I don't want the education of the kids to suffer for that.
Right.
So do I just keep thinking we have enough money here to keep going without raising the tax?
Well, there's a lot of variables. We'll be opening the schools because we have additional students. And with the additional students, we generate more state aid. And with the additional values, of course, our values are going to grow, so our tax revenue will grow as well. So as we've seen in the past, all of those revenue items have grown at a faster rate than our expenses have.
Okay.
And so we expect that you'll still see that offset.
Okay,
And
I'm
what-
smiling now.
And of course, we're going to be modeling, a couple years out. There's some bit of certainty in a couple years estimate or projection, but in 2 years we'll have another legislative session. So we're definitely going to continue to model several years out, and we'll go more than 2. But again, when the legislature meets, you'll have changes that we'll have to continually model.
And one of the advantages that we have is we have a September 1 budget, which allows us to actually see what our tax property values are going to be. So we're not estimating when we come to the board with the recommendation.
Exactly. That helps a lot.
Okay, thank you so much.
The next item, we ask the Board of Trustees to consider approval of the following documents that are submitted by Carrie Surratt, Fort Bend County Tax Assessor Collector, submission of the 2019 tax year appraisal roll, and the 2019 tax year certified appraisal roll. All of this is required from that department. The next item, we ask the board to consider approval of the anticipated tax collection rate of 100% for the 2019 tax year. The next item, we ask the board,
Slow down.
Is this number 5? Am I following along correctly?
We were 10,
3.
number 4.
yes, we are now at page 72.
Oh, we're going a little fast.
I'll slow down, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
There's just a lot of pages in between.
Okay,
Yeah, I had a question on that item.
okay,
Okay.
On number 5.
On which one?
I
page,
got B5.
Oh, we haven't done that.
we're getting ready to
Oh,
do
good.
that one now.
Perfect.
Yes, sir. We ask the Board of Trustees to approve a resolution for the commitment of fund balance established according to the district fund balance policy and in compliance with GASB 54.
Okay. Your question?
Yeah, this is a general question and then a specific question. Do we have a rainy day fund for the district? And how much is in that fund? If do?
We don't have anything that's specifically called the rainy day fund, but we do have a fund balance. And then the fund balance is divided into several categories. And there is one that is unassigned, uncommitted, and it could be called a rainy day fund. It's what's left after we make assignments, reservations, and commitments. So it would be spendable fund balance.
Do you have that number, Jill? He asked for the-
I don't have that number in front of me right now, but I can get it, and I can give it to you as of 8/31/2018, because that's our latest audited financials.
So this money that we're required to set aside, I assume this money is taken out of the general budget and just kept in reserves? Is that how that works?
This is actually the apportionment of fund balance that I was just referring to. So there's different categories of fund balance. The board actually makes commitments, and these are the commitments that we're recommending. And typically they relate to child nutrition, future desires of the board, like purchasing land for buildings and things like that, a reserve to assist if our self-funded health and workers' comp plans need additional funding due to excess claims or things like that. And then last year, we did a tax rate swap out of fund balance and dropped the INS rate from 35 cents to 33 cents, which generates typically $3.2 million. And so we committed that much of fund balance for that transfer to debt service if we needed it. We've not needed it, and we probably will not transfer it yet, so we're going to leave it in the general fund until we do need it. There are assignments of fund balance, and Dr. Randall and I actually recommend the amount that is assigned out of fund balance. And it's usually based on commitments that we have as a district as of the last day of our fiscal year, which means that we have lots of purchase orders that have been issued in the 18-19 year, but they're not complete, and they'll be completed after August 31st. So we've made commitments to vendors and outside parties for certain dollar amounts. So we have to reserve that or assign it out of fund balance so that it's not spent or committed for something else. So like I said, we have several different categories of fund balance, and then what's left is your rainy day fund.
Is there an amount we have to keep that, just in case something should happen?
The TEA recommends 3 months operating.
Right.
Or 12.5% to 25% of your budget, your budget total. And we usually stay within that range, and actually on the high end of that range.
Okay. That's what I thought. You good?
I'm good.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
The next item, we ask the Board of Trustees to consider approval of the 2019-2020 compensation plan.
Dr.
And-
Randall, they actually gave me what our unassigned fund balance was at the end of last fiscal year, and it was about $60.9 million. I have a good crew out here.
They got your back. All right.
And you received another copy of the compensation plan with a spelling correction, and we appreciate that being identified. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question on that. What is the non-cash, the non-cash? I had a question from somebody that was asking, so if somebody doesn't have benefits with the district and they have the cash portion, how do they benefit from the non-cash portion?
We fund the health plan based on, well, how do they benefit? There's two different questions there too. We fund the self-funded health health plan based on the number of employees we have, whether they participate or they do not. So, so that's part of that calculation. Within benefits also, the amount of the raise, for instance, if they're in the 5 or more years of teaching experience and they're receiving the $3,500, there are additional TRS employer portion funding that we have to make as a district. So that those funds are transmitted to TRS and earmarked for our employees. Well, actually, they're not earmarked for our employees, but they are used to sustain the TRS pension plan. Again, that's a state mandated requirement. Every school district has to pay in an employer portion to TRS.
Okay, so if they,
Push your button.
sorry, thank you. So if they have benefits, or so all of the non-cash possibilities that y'all would use it for, so it's TRS and then their health plans. Those are the two.
Those are the two big ones, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Is there a schedule for teachers based on their years of experience about what their salary would be?
Yes, there's a hiring schedule.
Okay. And is that typically on the website for
Yes.
prospective? Okay.
Yes. That's not in the compensation plan.
No, the hiring, what's in the compensation plan book is the amount that we've identified for raises, the 3,000 for the 5 and under and 3,500 for the 6 and up. And then the hiring schedule that you're referring to for people that are coming in new to the district, we place that on the website, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. One additional question that I had is on the stipend schedule, it has extra days, and then it listed out athletic stipends and other stipends. What is that?
So for some of our coaching positions and some of our other extracurricular positions, they have additional days. They work beyond the 187. So if it says 10 extra days, they may come 5 early or 10 days early, and we pay them their daily rate to compensate for the fact that they're required to report 10 days early.
Okay, thanks.
You good?
The next item, we ask the board to ratify the quarterly investment report as submitted for the quarter ending May 31st, 2019. The next item, we ask the Board of Trustees to ratify the financial investment report. The next item, we ask the board to consider approval of budget amendment request.
On page 87 and 88.
Thank you. Just go,
I know, it's okay. Any questions?
Could someone explain on page 88? I didn't understand what that was.
I hope I can explain this in a succinct way, because okay, so I guess the best way to go about it is the board adopts the general fund budget at the function level, and that's the second set of digits in our account code structure. So all the reporting that we do to the state is also at the function level. And as a district, we cannot exceed the expenditures for the audited expenditures for the year cannot exceed the approved budget at the function level. So at the end of the year, we take and do a massive, internally we call this a massive budget change. So we take the currently adopted budget, all of the year-to-date expenditures, plus everything that's encumbered, and then we determine what year-end closing entries we have to make. For instance, one of the big ones is we've got to do a journal entry for wages that have been incurred or we have to accrue versus what's been paid out. So there's about $1 million entry that we do. And there's several other closing entries like that. So we estimate those and transfers to the health plan and all the items that might occur. For instance, the incident with the light pole at trailer, and various things like that. And then we figure out where we're going to be as far as budget versus actual. And then we do an amendment to increase the budget to accommodate all those items. We don't intend to spend everything that's here. This is really just a compliance entry to get our budgets in excess of whatever we think we might have to spend. There's actually a cushion here so that whatever could happen, we're covered for.
So for example, on classroom instruction, $7.8 million, we were over budget there. And so just to make sure that we don't hit the ceiling, you're asking for a budget amendment up?
Yes, we're not currently over budget, but we do know that the biggest portion of that wage accrual entry is going to hit Function 11. And when we transfer funds to the self-funded health plan accounts, we'll have to do an entry for that because we're covering some prior year deficits. So in order to accommodate all that, we need to add to the budget.
And then when you're asking to increase the budget, where do those funds come from? Because usually when we do budget amendments, it's taking from somewhere else, adding it.
Correct. It's going to cause the expenditure side of the budget to be higher than the revenue budget. However, not everything that we've increased for here is actually going to result in an expenditure.
Okay.
This is really just a compliance budget amendment.
Thank you.
And that's why we do it at the very end of the year.
Okay, we're on page 89. And we ask that the Board of Trustees review and approve the district investment policy to comply with the Public Fund Investment Act. The next item is page 122, and we ask the board to approve the service agreement with Memorial Hermann Benefit Corporation. The next item is on page 135. We ask the Board of Trustees to ratify donations to the district.
Thursday. And what's the number that they don't have to, we don't have to approve it? Up to what amount now is it?
5,000.
5,000, that's what I thought. Okay.
The next item, we ask the board to approve the superintendent SMART goals. And the goals have actually been, we've taken the strategic plan, the priorities from the strategic plan, and applied the superintendent SMART goals to the strategic plan. You won't see every single area covered because with rule of 3, we try to identify those areas that there are 1 or 2 SMART goals under each one of those areas, that at the end of the year, the board will have an opportunity to hold us accountable for achieving. But even our district improvement plans have also been coordinated with the strategic plan and the superintendent SMART goals.
I have some
Questions?
I have
Okay.
several questions.
Okay.
I heard what you just said, Dr. Randall. I don't understand this wording in light of that, though. On page 136, it says the board annually sets the superintendent's SMART goals. So I've been on the board 3 months, and I wasn't a part of that setting, so I don't know.
You came at just the right time. Typically, the board has a retreat or a board superintendent team meeting and establishes the goals. Because we were doing a strategic plan, we made the decision to wait until the strategic plan was complete. The strategic plan was approved by the board back in April. And so now we're taking and applying the SMART goals to the strategic plan so that we can get in the cycle of responding to what's in the strategic plan. That's why.
So what we used to do is come up with 5 basic goals that they're in here, they're just
Reworded.
Right.
And because we had technology, we had safety, we had, communication. So then when we did the strategic plan, it came up with the areas that the people on that committee felt that we should be looking at to move our district forward in the next 5 years. So what you're saying, Dr. Randall, is by taking those goals, you have made these SMART goals, but you're saying we would not hit every, because we,
It's actually possible because the strategic plan really, in some instances, mirrored what some of the SMART goals had been in the past. But they've been wrapped into this. This is not the total superintendent's evaluation. This is just one component of the evaluation.
So are we going to get a chance before we vote on this to sit down together to go over these before we approve them and like come up with some details that is that that we're able to do?
That is certainly something that the board can choose to do by either just putting these on hold and either at the next board meeting or at a special board meeting, go through these in detail, similar to what we did with the board superintendent team training. That's certainly one avenue. What we were trying to do was respond to the timeline because of the goals being approved, or the strategic plan being approved in April.
and being that after 6 months, we usually do hear an evaluation of where they have been and where they are going. So were you going to give us a update of where we have been hitting some of these goals already or not?
Yes.
Okay, and when that was going to be on Thursday?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that we need to hear that presentation.
But these are different than that, right? These are going forward for January's evaluation.
But he's going, you explain.
It is really, the evaluations goes from January to December, okay? But it incorporates the school year, which would be 19-20, and you will be doing the evaluation in January of 20 of what occurred the previous year, actually a year and a half is what it amounts to.
But if we're I guess my question is, can we have a meeting together and just kind of talk about some of these in detail before we approve them, as a board?
That's not a problem, but keep in mind, when the board approved a strategic plan.
But the strategic plan is different than the superintendent's goals.
No, the SMART goals are actually taking what the board approved as a strategic plan and putting them in the SMART goals, something that you can actually hold me accountable for. So it's not anything different. There's no goal, no SMART goal in here that's different from the strategic plan.
I guess my thought is some of these seem kind of generic, and so I felt like it was appropriate to have some more details, not on all of them necessarily, but in all fairness to you and all fairness to all of us, as if we're supposed to be kind of doing it together. Like some of the things don't really have numbers in them or details, and so I just thought some of them, I'd like to see some more detail.
But I think that's what the presentation they usually give us is how they met that. These are just the goals, how they're going to meet that.
I guess I would like to, okay, but.
That is usually the presentation that
okay, so I guess what I'm asking is if we can have a meeting together and just go over it before we approve.
That is certainly up to this board.
I would feel more a part of the team if we could do that.
Well, I guess what you wanted to do Thursday, we could do today if we have time.
It'd actually be better Thursday.
Okay, all right.
Okay, but you can't take action on that tonight anyway, so.
Right, and that's what I'm
but,
asking,
yes.
so on Thursday, we don't, maybe, if we just come early, I guess, or how does that work?
That's very involved.
And that way we don't have two separate ones, or, I don't know if there's committee meetings beforehand, I don't know.
Well, no, you can't do
'cause it has
this early because it has to be on an agenda, and that has to be 72 hours before you actually have the meeting. It's on the board agenda, and you could actually do it during the board meeting
Okay,
if you choose to do so. During when you make the motion to approve the SMART goals or not, whichever you prefer to do, then during that time, whatever changes you would like to propose to the rest of the board, you could actually do it then.
so, okay, so it can be tweaked during and then you approve it kind of thing?
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah,
So
that'd be great.
if certain one was something that you just didn't understand, we could discuss it Thursday night and then get a little bit more detail into
And
that.
it's not so much not understanding, it's, I mean, I went through them and I thought they were pretty well-written. It's just some of them I'd like to see some more detail on,
Right.
you know?
Which
so-
probably will be answered in some of the presentation I think they're going to give.
And maybe so. I
Well,
just-
well, and the only concern I have is that, you know, in September, we have one meeting, and I don't want, it because we're going to convention, so we need to make sure that these are approved however we want them done early enough, because then come January is when we do this.
Okay, well, then we can do it at Thursday's meeting. We'll just
Yeah.
add a little time till.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm clear, when is that presentation? Is that?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Well,
Thursday.
And then
it's,
we're going to be voting on the consent agenda.
All right, let's get the, what I think Ms. Danziger is referencing is the mid-year review.
right.
And that is typically when the board has an opportunity to sit down in closed session and talk about what has been done up to this point and any concerns that you may have. That's the presentation, that's the mid-year review. And, but if there are tweaks that you're wanting to make, then certainly you have an opportunity on Thursday to present those. And then the board can either agree or not agree, or certainly, since it's referring to my goals, I have an opportunity to perhaps comment on them. And then it may not be that we need an additional meeting, depending on how long it takes for those.
Okay. So that would be an open, that would not be in the closed, so
That's
just the
that's correct.
update is closed.
Right.
That's correct.
Right, and so if you come on Thursday, if you have some areas that you wish to present, but it's when we say, after we make a motion, and if we have any questions or comments, then we can start.
Okay, all right, thank you.
On page 142, and we ask that the board approve second reading of localized policy manual up to 112. The next item is on page 143, and we're asking that the board approve the attached resolution proclaiming September 2019 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in Lamar CISD. The next item is on page 145, and we ask the board to approve the attached resolution proclaiming September 15th through October 15th as Hispanic Heritage Month in LCISD. The next item, we ask that the Board of Trustees approve the resolution for extracurricular status of 4-H organizations. And we do that so that the extension agents are considered adjunct, and when the kids go out to participate in shows and that type of thing, they won't be marked absent. The next item, we ask that the board approve PBK Architects for the design of Lamar Consolidated High, Lamar Junior High School additions and renovations, and allow the superintendent to begin contract negotiations. That's on page 151. The next item, we ask the Board of Trustees to approve VLK Architects for the design of Terry High and George Junior High additions and renovations, and allow the superintendent to begin contract negotiations.
Will we have those presentations tonight or Thursday
for, these are,
Oh, I'm sorry, I've got ahead of myself.
okay.
Sorry. You're right. I'm reading ahead.
Okay, now I lost my spot.
153.
All right. That the Board of Trustees approve the final payment of $22,485.30 to Acme Architecture Hardware for the installation of the intruder lock sets at all classrooms, or in all classrooms.
Nah.
Now, we ask the Board of Trustees to approve the schematic design for the Alternative Learning Center additions and renovations as presented by BLK Architects.
Yeah. BLK is very busy.
I would like to introduce Mr. Todd Lean, Principal with VLK Architects. They have been working on the schematic design for the Alternative Learning Center renovations and additions. They have taken it to a point where they now need to obtain board approval, which we'll be seeking your approval at the Thursday meeting. They presented to the Facilities Committee meeting earlier this evening and are now prepared to present their work to date to you right now.
Jim, Ms. Danziger, members of the board, Dr. Randall, thank you again for allowing us to work on this project for you today. As Jim said, I'm going to let the gentleman who did all the design and our other team do the presentation, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing tonight. And it's, like Jim said, it's the schematic design portion, which is meaning we've met extensively with the user groups, the administration, the people that are use those buildings to come up with a program of spaces that will meet the needs for their new building, but also look at safety and security for the students and really come up with a very, we call it schematic, but a very diagrammatic plan that we'll ask you to approve that allows us to move forward so that we can get into a lot more detail of potential phasing, budget, all those things. But tonight is just a broad overview of the project, and I'm going to let Brad Ewing, our designer, walk you through it.
Good evening. Like Todd said, my name is Brad Ewing, and for the schematic design presentation, like you said, it's very diagrammatic. To get to that point, we had to have several intake meetings where we met with design team, program manager, where we put together a bunch of notes that we then turn into graphical space diagrams. And when we do that, we look at how those spaces function with each other. We look at the adjacencies. And from there, we can move into taking those spaces and thinking of putting them together as a building program. This project's really unique because it has three different educational programs. You have the ALC, the CIBC, and the 1621. And the design challenge is to get all of them on this existing site and to function in a safe way and also be a positive learning environment. So this is the result of our programming meetings. We then took it to our site, which we had a lot of parameters, we had lots of easements, but it is a very pretty site. It has lots of old oak trees on there, so one of the things we try to do is respect that and celebrate it. One thing we have, we've designed a courtyard where we call them the Twin Oaks, where the 1621 would engage that in a courtyard. But really what you have here is the ALC is to the north, the west you have CIBC, and to the south is 1621. All three have their own entries, and in the core you have an admin space. Looking into the floor plan of the schematic floor plan, ALC students would come in and they would utilize a covered gym area to come in and do their intake. They would come and then after security procedures go through to their classrooms. CIBC has their own space on the left side there of the plan. There's an existing shop building that would be connected to the ALC classrooms through a canopy. And then on the south side, you have the 1621 classroom program. or they have a commons area that's a nice flexible multi-use space where they can open up walls and those students can utilize that space that opens up to the courtyard, northern light, indirect light. On the site you have a bunch of beautiful oak trees that provide shade from the hot southern sun. So it's a perfect placement for those classrooms. If we look at how the building's arranged on the site, it's a one-story building. There are a couple architectural features that we added, like the commons you can see here that opens up to the courtyard. The ALC classrooms, when we were talking about windows, we didn't want a bunch of windows for distraction in the classroom, so we provided a clear story window to bring natural light into that hallway space and into the classrooms. As you can see, there's a separate entry for ALC, CIBC, 1621. And one of the comments about 1621 is they wanted a good street presence from First Street. So from there, they'll have, you can see here from First Street on the bottom photo, you'll see the courtyard, that popped up roof. This is the 1621 entry off of Dyer Street. This is off of M Street. This is the ALC entry. There you can see the covered gym area. That covered gym area is used by both the program of the ALC and the 1621. And that was one of the challenges of fitting it on the site, is how do we put it on there where both programs can utilize that covered gym area. So as Todd said, we're here on the schematic design part of the process, and we're seeking your approval so we can move on and look at go into design development, so we can look at how we can improve and do the constructability of the project. So if you have any questions?
Can you back up to the layout?
Yeah.
3 slides back. So going forward one. So the existing shop is staying.
The existing shop, yes.
So the building in the back up there in the parking lot that's existing is going to be removed?
Yes.
The staff parking area?
There will be, there's some portables here.
Bottom, I guess it'd be
No, he's
bottom
talking
left.
about down at the bottom.
Oh, down
That-
here.
That building is going to be,
Yeah, this will be demolished. We are renovating this admin area, but everything else will be removed.
Yeah, okay, that was going to be my next question, whether it's the building up at the top along Avenue N was going to be renovated or removed.
Yeah, these buildings will be removed that are here right now. And so that, pretty much the shop building and your existing admin building are the two structures that will remain when the project is complete.
Did the administration part, that was just renovated not too long ago, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So we'll be doing a few upgrades to that, like adding a conference room in there.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
the next item is the schematic design for Jane Long. Jim.
Which I think some of our board members were in the other day.
Yeah, I don't really understand the historic part of the Jane Long gym, but I know it's been there a long time.
1947.
1947.
1947.
It was where the kids had PE once upon a time.
We have a presentation for you
Okay.
if you'd like to see it.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And so we've been meeting with the program managers for the Jane Long Gym. This project will house the Common Threads program. And the Common Threads program is, they provide supplies and clothing to district staff and parents and students. And so right now they are split up. They're housed, and they have different programs that are housed across the street. And so really what we're tasked to do is to take and consolidate that all into the historic gym. So we had several meetings. We brought our consultants out to the site. We had engineers look at, what we can construct in this historic building, what we'll have to do to it, and how we can renovate that space. So we had kind of the same discussion where we had a program discussion, all the spaces, adjacencies, how they would work together. We looked at the site, and what we're showing here is the schematic site, what we would do. We want to look at creating a better accessibility to the front of the building, adding some canopies and ramps to the front entry. We would have a new drop-off drive that would run around that south side of the building, come around, and you'd have a new clothing drop-off, just to improve that access for the drop-off process. When we look at the schematic layout of the floor plan, there's only so much we can do inside there without, the structural integrity of the building. So what we've done here is we've laid out a system where the administration part of the building is on the right side. So that right entry is, you have a vestibule, a workroom, a receptionist, and then you have your admin core right here. The southern entry is the public entrance. They would come in, they would have a reception area. That volunteer hub is right there. They can pull families aside and guide them to the areas they need to go. There's a new men's and women's restroom. And then back of house, we have our storage rooms. You have a new drop-off sorting area and a much-needed laundry area. Area here is an existing stage. So that's why you see the elevation of this floor is up a little bit higher, so we have to provide a ramp and stairs up here. But this will be their general storage here. We have nice big doors so they can bring their clothing racks out onto the main showroom. Here's a few pictures of the existing facade. As you can see, there's some windows here. Some of the windows have a few rot issues, so we will be looking at that. We'll be doing an alternative roof the building. Here's a few pictures of the existing space. You can see there's that stage. So at this point in the process, we've gotten all the spatial adjacencies and our general site plan. We're just looking for approval so we can move on to the next step for the constructability of the project. And if there's any questions, we can take those right now.
What will be in the offices?
Project Learn, all of their staff, the social workers, all of the ones that you saw in the cubicles over in the other building.
Okay.
They're moving all of them over. It says administration, but they're really all of the folks that work with Project Learn.
Right now, they're in one big room with lots of little
So
dividers.
what will happen to that building?
That was my question. He said I was getting ahead of myself.
Don't ask.
Well, we haven't purposed it yet.
Okay.
Another budget amendment.
Thank you.
Never mind. Scratch it.
I know, we're always getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay, the next item is approval of the appraisal calendar. And this is actually, for those of you who are teachers or have been around it, it identifies the time that administrators can come in and do actual observations.
Did we do this before?
Oh, here we go. Here.
And now we're on page 159. We ask the board to approve the appraisers who have recently become certified or are new to Lamar CISD. And then you had a list of the administrative staff that we ask for your approval. And the next item is on page 160, and we ask the Board of Trustees to approve the 2019-2020 Lamar CISD Student Code of Conduct. And you have another insert, and again, thank you, Mr. Hunt, for identifying one word that needed to be placed in there.
Any other Any questions over?
I did have a question, but I'm
Okay.
trying to figure out whether. Well, just tell me what it was. Excellent. Okay. That was going to be, so on page 13 of the conduct, I was curious as to what physical comfort means, and how that's, is that, it says that we can't, denying adequate sleep, air, food, water, shelter, bedding, physical comfort. Is that, like, what, how does someone define that?
They are ready to answer that for you.
Can't wait for this.
I mean, is it like taking away a cell phone? Because that's definitely physical.
I'm thinking no, but we'll see.
Okay, so this is not over what's omitted and replaced. What page were you in?
Page 13.
It's the 4th square down
Oh, okay, I see.
bullet.
In the yellow. But you can't do that.
And in the last paragraph, it also says discomfort, so I was just curious
Well, it refers to denying adequate sleep, air, food, water, shelter, bedding, or physical comfort, anything that's comforting to a child. So let's say a child maybe have, I guess for lack of a better word, a blankie or a support item.
So not a cell phone?
But not a cell phone. No. They're talking about something, a physical, tactile thing that they would hold on
I
to.
consider, a lot of kids consider
Well,
that.
yes, ma'am. That is very true.
They're blanky these days.
That is true.
Making sure we're, still on the same page.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, that comes to the end of the action items. Ms. Gossett, do we have any audience to the patrons for
Yes,
the
Madam
comments
President.
on the action items?
It says vision of special needs classrooms.
Is that for Thursday night? Because they.
No, we're actually doing the special
Okay.
education update tonight.
So we can do
yes.
that. Okay,
So do we want to do this?
yeah, that's fine.
We are
Just
now at the
checking.
portion of the meeting when the board allots time to hear persons who desire to make comments to the board. Persons who wish to speak to the board must sign up to do so as they arrive, and they must indicate the topic about which they wish to speak. No presentation shall exceed 5 minutes. Delegations of more than 5 persons shall appoint one person to present their views. The board will hear the concerns, but the board cannot deliberate, discuss, or make a decision on any subject that is not posted on the agenda. Persons who speak to the board cannot complain about a district officer or employee in open session. Such concerns are heard in closed session after proper posting of the agenda item has occurred. As you come forward, please state your name and your address. Our first speaker is Michelle Armstrong.
Like she said, my name is Michelle Armstrong, and I come here as a special needs mother, but I'm also representing probably about 14 to 20 kids at Bentley Elementary. I first want to see how we feel about special education in Lamar. So I have a question that Maxwell has posted on his website. He's a leadership author, and it says, how do you describe the program at Lamar ISD for special needs children? How would you describe it? For me, I would be very nice and say maybe it's average. And what does that mean? Is it the program the top of the bottom? Are we talking about the program being the best of the worst? Are we talking at the bottom, or are we talking about the bottom of the top of the worst? Or we are talking about the worst of the best? So where would you describe Lamar ISD as being a special needs mother? And I would say probably the bottom of the worst. I think that we all need to agree that there needs to be more conversation with the parents. I was never given a survey of how the school district was doing. I never was given a phone call. I've had many ARDs, and I do want to go over all of our ARDs and all of our issues that we have received by having just 2 years in PPCD. Like I said, I am a special needs mother, and I do have recently, I do want to give you a little bit of background. I do have a higher educational. I have a master's in instructional technology at Texas A&M Kingsville. I do know that there are no data on special needs kids at this point. If we did have data, we would be able to find more funding. There are tons of grants out there. I wrote grants for 5 years, and there is grants for special needs kids. My daughter especially is a nonverbal. Microsoft is giving tons of money to nonverbal kids. We have no data on what our special needs children are. If they're nonverbal, are they in a wheelchair? We have nothing. And I think that's why we keep on placing them and doing the ring around the rosy. Also, if we did have proper data on what our special needs kids actually need, we would start looking at other school districts that would model something that we would have a vision for. Robstown just did a whole vamp on their special education. They have swings in their classrooms. They have all kinds of sensory items. We have nothing in the classroom. We need more data on what these kids actually have disabilities on, and how do we move on from there. All right. So, for the record, my daughter is PPCD self-inclusion classroom at Bentley Elementary in 2018. We traveled 20-plus miles one way to get her to a classroom that was considered self-inclusion, because her home campus was Lindsay and did not have a self-inclusion classroom. So, this is where the school district has completely lost all credibility in my eyes. Her classroom was had 7 students in the AM and PM. That was maxed. That's a total of 14 students, and that's exactly why I'm saying I'm representing 14 to 20 students, because I know all those parents could not be here for this meeting. Those 14 students, I have been told, because we got a phone call saying that my daughter will now be going into a Pegasus classroom, a whole different theory, a whole different not self-inclusion. Now she's going to be doing a whole nother theory, not the same thing. That's very interesting to me, because just a year prior when we got her assessed, she didn't qualify to be in a Pegasus classroom. She qualified to be in a self-inclusion, and that's why I drove 20 miles. If I knew she qualified to be in a Pegasus classroom, I wouldn't have put her in there. I would have gone to her home campus 5 miles away for a whole year. That also leads me to, why are we moving around the most vulnerable? I know there was another special need parent bringing this up last time, and I do want to say there is so much more to that. We're not just moving around the most vulnerable. We're moving their home. We're basically moving everything they knew. It takes them a whole year to adjust. Just another analogy. You take another computer. You're a Mac lover. You go ahead and take Dell. You take anything.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
You take a Dell for a year, then go back to a Mac, then go back to a Dell, then go back to a Mac.
You had to say that
Your time's allotted, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm representing 14 people right now,
No,
and I
it's-
waited for all of your agenda items, and I know most of them already went over too. So I'm almost done, and I appreciate your time. Another
You
quote
can
from
come back on Thursday and complete it.
Do you understand that I have a special needs child?
Yes, I
Do you
do.
have a special needs child? I go to 45 appointments in 1 month. I run around. I get her to,
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. May I need to go to information items?
Yes, ma'am.
I wish you'd stay for the information item.
I have a question. At what point do we discuss as a board the items brought forth by the public? I have no clue. I mean, is it?
If you recall, the last time, there was a person who spoke to the board about special education. You have a special ed update on this agenda. And the purpose of that is to respond to, give you an opportunity this month next month and the month after that to be brought up to speed and ask the questions that you need to have staff about special ed and any special questions that you have. So, but you don't, as far as responding directly to a presentation that's been done, that the board has not done in the past.
But truthfully, I think if her presentation had been Thursday after our presentation today, we'd have a little more.
Or if she was still here
Yes,
for
if-
the
for our
for the
presentation.
update, she would at least hear some of there are reasons for, and maybe maybe we'll just skip past the next item on the agenda and go straight to the special ed update.
Let's do that.
Because at least you'll have an opportunity to hear some of the rationale as far as why some decisions are being made, that type of thing. And I know that
Which one is that on?
And you did send us an email with all the answers to the last.
To the last question, that's correct.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Randall. I'm Tiffany Mathis. I am the Executive Director of Special Education, and I am going to go over basically the state of special education in Texas and the impact it has had on Lamar CISD. So first off, there was an article back in the fall of 2016 that basically identified a school district in our area that failed to identify a student for special education. From that, the Office of Special Education Programs came to Texas and did their own investigation of the 8.5% cap that was on our PBMAS accountability system. They responded to that article and their investigation with the letter in January of 2018. From there, TEA was asked to do corrective actions, and they developed from that the strategic plan. OSEP responded to TEA's response in October of 2018. TEA responded with corrections in January of 2019, and then there was a visit to our area in May of 2019. It's important to note this because with any corrective action, we have 1 year to fix it. And so if you note, we did not actually have a response to the letter until April of 2018. So that meant we had to begin doing something because we were responsible for any corrective action by January of 2019. The Texas Strategic Plan looked at 5 areas of improvement, the first being monitoring of school districts and charters, identification, evaluation, and placement, which is child find for special education, training, support, and development, student and family engagement, and technical assistance networks. Today, we're going to focus on the identification, evaluation, and placement because that is a concern within our school district. When we received the letter, and I'm sorry for the background, it's hard to see, but when we received the letter, there are areas that the state did address, or the OSEP did address. The first thing is the 8.5% cap. It looked at the patterns and practices of the school districts, and were we actually keeping kids out of special education to stay under the 8.5% cap? TEA's response to that was they amended the Texas Education Code 29.011. Basically, they did that because IDEA does not limit or put any percentages on the definition of a student with a disability. In addition to that, they looked at Section 504 services. They looked at some of our students receiving 504 and why they were not necessarily evaluated for an initial evaluation under the IDEA. There were teachers who suspected students may have disabilities and the need for special education and related services, but instead of moving forward with an evaluation under the IDEA, they kept them under Section 504. The response to that was the suspected need for special education requires a referral at any time. You cannot hold a student back regardless to the program options that may be available. Dyslexia was another area. They looked at the inconsistencies of school districts in the application and policies and procedures associated with referring students for dyslexia. In Texas, you can refer a student for dyslexia through Section 504 or the IDEA. But when you look at the definition of dyslexia. It is identified as a specific learning disability. The only way to diagnose a specific learning disability is through a full and individual evaluation. So that is another area that they looked at. The next thing is a multi-tier system of supports. You may have heard of it as response to intervention. They looked at the patterns and practices in the school districts, and basically they looked at whether or not kids were suspected of having disabilities but were pushed through an MTSS system to basically keep them out of special education, or they were left in MTSS too long and therefore did not receive the services that they needed. So TEA's response is that they are developing an MTSS framework and guidance to clarify the goal of early screening, as well as not making students go through that process prior to that referral. Finally, they looked at teachers' understanding of the MTSS system. There were expressed concerns and clarity of entry and exit of RTI or MTSS, the length of intervention, how and when children move through the actual tiers, which are how do you use those interventions to provide support. So TEA responded and said that they will actually provide support and services that are effective in implementation of universal screening, evidence-based interventions, progress monitoring, and database decision-making. So results of the strategic plan. The state required school districts to complete the following in the initial draft of the strategic plan. Section 504 students, we had to review their service plans to determine if that was the appropriate program for them. Students who were in RTI 6 months or longer, because you would expect that if you were receiving an intervention, you would make progress. And if a student was in RTI longer than that, did they actually access the appropriate program? Next, students receiving dyslexia services. And then finally, students who should have been referred to special education based on multiple data points. We have kids in different school districts that may have received failing grades or retained in a certain grade level, and they were never referred for special education. And so they wanted us to look at those kiddos to see what is it that they need, why are they not making the progress that they need, and what supports and services are in place. In addition to that, the strategic plan looked at the actual dyslexia handbook, and they revised it, and it came out in November of 2018. One of the things that they noted in the handbook was required screening for students in kindergarten and first grade for dyslexia and related services. The issue with this is that when it came out in November of 2018, we were required to do the first grade screening by the end of January. So it didn't give us a lot of time to, number one, identify an appropriate screening, and then also have a response to those students who are still developing if they did not master certain curriculum areas. So the impact on Lamar CISD. We have an increased number of referrals to special education, increased number of supports and services provided to qualified students, and then review of possible compensatory services for students who were not referred to special education in a timely manner. When we talk about the referrals, I do want to discuss the timelines because I know a lot of people have a lot of concerns about our timelines. According to Texas Administrative Code 89.1011, we have 15 school days to respond to a parent's request for special education testing. The reason for that is it gives the school district time to investigate the need for the referral, because according to the legal guidance, we do not have to test every parent request. The problem with not testing, though, can implicate the school district and owing compensatory services. So while we do investigate what are the grades, what are the progress on benchmarks, previous state assessments, discipline records, and different things like that, if we do not test and the kiddo continues to struggle, then we may have to go back, assess, and then if the child does qualify, we would owe those compensatory services. So at this time, we pretty much test every parent request, and that is something that we have not done in the past. But with the strategic plan review and all of the requirements that are asked of the school districts, we don't really have a choice because it kind of puts us in a catch-22. Once we receive consent from the parent, we have 45 school days to assess the student from the date of consent. I know that seems like a really long time when you count those calendar or the actual school days. But the issue is that, number one, we as evaluators, we have to, number one, establish rapport with students. If we go in and we assess a child that we really do not know, there's a likelihood that that child may not respond to the questions that we're asking because they're not comfortable with us. So it takes some time to actually go through the process. In addition to that, when I start to show you the numbers, you're going to see how we have been impacted in terms of referrals. From the date of the report, we have 30 days to have an RD to discuss whether or not the child meets the condition of any disability criteria set by the IDEA. One other factor for the 45 school days are absenteeism. So if a student is absent, then we look at how many days. If it's 3 or more days from the time of parental consent, then that too is added on as far as that time frame. And I just want to talk about that a little bit because it can be extended, and that is the reason why. So when we look at our referrals over the last 5 years in Lamar CISD, we had in 2014-15 342 referrals. That following year, we only had 244 referrals, which was my second year in the district, and that caused some concern because you typically don't decrease in that area, and if you do, you need to find out why. And so we had some conversations with campuses. We talked about when you need to refer, and we did a lot of training on Child Find. From there, we move into 2016-17. The fall of 2016 is when the article was written in the Houston Chronicle. That increased our number of parental requests for testing. 2017-18, we continued to rise in our number of referrals. As you can see, in 2018-19, with the strategic plan review, it jumped from 748 referrals to 1,903. Please remember, though, in addition to the strategic plan, there's the dyslexia component where we have to screen students. And if a child is still developing after kindergarten and then first grade, there is a possibility that either the child may have a basic reading disorder or some other type of reading disability. With the number of referrals, we utilized 20 educational diagnosticians this past year, 7 licensed specialists in school psychology, 3 LSSP interns and trainees, 22 speech and language pathologists, 9 speech assistants, 14 assessment contractors. The ARD specialists and diagnosticians and speech paths all hold ARDs. So we had a number of people trying to hold the meetings because remember, with over 1,000, almost 2,000 referrals, we did have to have a lot of ARD meetings, which takes time as well. As a result of the 1,900 referrals, we jumped 1,200 students this past school year. While I do understand that the timeline is an issue, we have worked very hard, very diligently to test as many students as we possibly could within that time frame. This past summer, we had 20 people who work in the school district that continue to work over the summer to try and assess our students to ensure that we can start the school year with students receiving the supports and services that they need. When you look at the impact of the number of students we're servicing, I want you to take a look at how many staffing units have been allocated to address this growth. From 2015-16 to 2019-20, we have grown 138 FTEs, which is only in the classroom. That does not constitute any other positions that help support the program. When you look at those additional staff members, we have 100+ itinerant staff members. We talked about the assessment staff, but in addition to that, we have occupational therapists, physical therapists, behavior analysts, teachers of the visually impaired, orientation and mobility specialists, in-home trainers, adapted PE teachers, and homebound teachers. So now we'll move into our programs, unless you want to ask questions now. Okay.
Will we have comments afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. When we look at our special education programs, one of the goals of the special education department is to focus on student outcomes with an intentional focus on ensuring student growth. That is the purpose of the IEP, or Individual Education Plan. Students have to make progress from the goal established until their next annual R. When reviewing the special education programs, we found that approximately 72% of our teaching units were designated for academic support, while the other 28%, or 122 staffing units, were designated to support student behaviors with limited academic instructional support. This required us to look more in depth at what we're doing with our teachers and our staff and how we're supporting our students so that we can continue to provide a continuum of services for all students with disabilities. So with our program, most of our students are in inclusive environments. We have 87% of those kiddos that actually are educated with their non-disabled peers. This includes academic behavior and early childhood services. And then in addition to that, those are the programs that we have in-class or mainstream support. We have Positive Approach to Student Success, which is our PASS program, Social Integration Learning Classroom, and then both of those are for behavior. We have our preschool program for children with disabilities, which will also next year be known as Early Childhood Special Education Services per TEA, and then speech and/or language therapy only. And on the other side, we have 13% that are in self-contained programs. These students are primarily provided services in a self-contained classroom with a smaller staff-to-student ratio. And during the 2018-19 school year, we had our life skills program, our social integration program, intensive behavior classroom, and then our PPCD early childhood program. An overview of our behavior program. As I stated, it is an inclusive program, PASS Silk is. Some students only require social skills supports within this classroom, or it's not a classroom. They access the teacher of the classroom. That teacher can provide social skills to the student once or twice per week. During the 2018-19 school year, all secondary campuses did have the program and 10 elementary campuses. 287 students accessed the PASS program. Of that, 192 students required support at the secondary level. The remaining 95 students were at the elementary level at those 10 campuses, but 50 of the 95 students were at 3 campuses, while the remaining 45 were split between 7. Each program is staffed with 2 teaching units, which typically is 1 teacher and 2 paraprofessionals. Our IBC program is, like I said, our self-contained program. We had 83 students in the entire school district served in this program. Of the 83, 53 were at the secondary level. This too is programmed with 2 to 2.5 teaching units. And then our elementary purple track students, because we have space issues on that side of the district, if they required this self-contained program, they had to travel to Jackson Elementary, which is in Rosenberg.
Bless you.
So our behavior findings, what we found is that we had a high number of teaching units for the PASS program because of the size of a building. To have 2.5 units cover a high school is very difficult because if a child does have an issue in the classroom, they may be on the opposite side of the building. And so what we found is that we were actually staffing because of the building size and not necessarily because of the students' needs. Only one out of the 5 elementary campuses had more than 10 students at one time in IBC. Out of the 4 other elementary campuses, it ranged from 3 to 7 students. And then elementary campuses that had both IBC and PASS had a high number of teaching units compared to the number of students being supported. So for the upcoming school year, after reviewing this, we looked at how can we actually use our teaching units in a more strategic way. We looked at and visited all of our campuses across the entire school district. When we looked at the combination of IBC Pass and Silk, we looked at what does IBC currently offer. Students can be self-contained, but they also have the ability to go out into the general education environment. In Pass, all of the kids are out, and our teachers and paraprofessionals monitor them while they're out. So, with our new program, most students will remain in the general education environment. But what we found is that we didn't have a justification of having two separate programs when both programs could offer you the same ability to be inclusive. In addition to that, we created a level system, because what we found is that when students are in a self-contained environment, they don't actually move out into that inclusive environment as often as they probably should, because it requires an ARD meeting or there's not enough supervision or monitoring in terms of the teaching staff. Teachers get very comfortable sometimes, and so we've monitored that, we've worked with our teachers, and we found that teachers are now getting our kids out. So if we have a program that is moving, or that will move students in and out, we can combine the programs because they have the same function. Students would no longer have to change campuses to receive that same level of support. And right now, for an example, at Huggins Elementary, they have the PASS program, but they don't have the IBC program. So if a child needed additional support, they would have to change schools. And so to stop that, we've created a program that allows them the entire continuum of support services without a change in campuses. All students will also have a homeroom teacher and a schedule to ensure seamless transitions when working through the levels. That's important because our IBC teachers would have to know the curriculum of every grade level and every subject area. And so that in itself is very difficult because they are in general education. They are not on an alternate curriculum such as our students who are in life skills programs. So at the secondary level, there is very minimal impact with this program because we have these staffing units in terms of the numbers of kids, meaning we have at one campus about 49 behavior students. That justifies the staff that is needed to support them. That's very different than having 6 kids that require the one teacher, 2 paraprofessionals for a PASS program. We are able to keep all of our students at their home campus who require the behavior support except for at Roberts Middle School, and that is just because it's new. Every time we open a campus, we look at new programs, but if they don't have enough kids, then it doesn't necessarily work. So for Roberts, right now, there are 4 students who would have to access that program. Currently, we are working with 2 families that actually will probably keep their kiddos at Roberts because they don't require intensive support. And so that's one of the caveats to all of the changes. Travel time will be significantly decreased at the middle school and junior high level because we only had one IBC program at each one of those levels. So Reading had the IBC program. So if you were at the purple track or gold track, maroon track, you would have to travel, I'm sorry, not maroon track, blue track, you would have to travel to the maroon track to get support, which is a significant drive if you're coming from the Fulshire or Katy area. At the middle school level, we had one program at Navarro. That would have required everybody from the outside to come into Rosenberg. Again, the purpose of changing our programs is to prevent the changing of schools. That is something that we have looked at for the past 4 years, and this is actually the last step in the process so that we can prevent the number of moves that have occurred in the past. At elementary, there's an increased impact because elementary students will remain closer to home. This past school year, we had one elementary that accepted students from more than 10 different campuses simply because they were located in the middle. And so you had students coming from maroon track into the blue track, the gold track into the maroon track, and then, like I said, you have your purple track floating all the way into Rosenberg. One elementary campus would not have to receive students from more than 4 other campuses. In addition to that, it reduced the number of students per campus requiring a self-contained program. The one campus that received more than 10 other campuses, they were up to 12 students in their self-contained program. That's a lot of behavior kids in one classroom. With our new model, the highest number of students that we have moving into the school year would be 5. Moving into our SIP and Life Skills program. When we looked at this, we've talked about this for the last couple of years because we've often tried to determine what is the difference between the two programs. And when we look at it, both the SIP and Life Skills curriculum, 95% of the students are on an alternate curriculum, meaning that they work through essence statements and they take a different state assessment. In addition to that, most of the students have sub-average intelligence. Again, there's a 95% number under the SIP program. All of the students require highly structured environments. You have to have the day planned completely because any downtime moves them off track. In addition to that, they need high visual supports, and they both have issues with receptive and expressive language, but one group of kids have, in addition to that, issues with pragmatic language, which is social skills. When we looked at this, there wasn't a real justification in why students would have to change programs or change campuses to access the programs. So for example, sometimes we'll have a kiddo that moves into our school district. When you first receive the student, you don't necessarily know them well. Once we have them, we try life skills based on maybe a program that they had when they came in. If they may have some behaviors that require them to access SIP, then people were moving them into another program, which may have required a change of campus. When we also looked at some of our students that we have to provide additional support to due to behaviors, there wasn't a difference between the number of students in life skills and the number of students in SIP. So for example, we had one classroom that we visited and they had both the SIP and the life skills classroom. There were more behaviors in the life skills program than there were in the SIP program, and that was supposed to be the difference between the two programs, okay? So with our new structured learning program, we are combining the life skills and SIP classrooms. All students must require an alternate curriculum. Students require minimal unstructured time. There are increased visual supports, and instruction focuses on real-life applications. The data collected is based on trials and the 4 levels of learning, which are acquisition, fluency, maintenance, and generalization. For our students that are in that 5%, we have what we call a CAP program and then the CSLC program. Basically, we provided this program because these students need high levels of ABA strategies, which is high levels of data collection on how to change the behavior. It's not intended to be a forever placement, but definitely a placement and program that separates those kiddos for a short period of time, hopefully, so that they can gain the skills that they need in order to be with their peers at a campus closer to home. The impact of SLC at secondary is less than 10 students because, again, we only had SIP programs at one campus at each level at secondary. The middle school and junior high campuses are able to have the same program because they have life skills and SIP. And so many of those kids do not have to make changes, especially 6th grade because they're only there that 1 year. So as they move to the next level, they're going to change campuses anyway, so that will not impact them. But we do have SIP at the high school level that did require about 4 students to move from the Lamar Consolidated High School area to Foster, and I believe from George Ranch. We have worked with a couple of those parents as well. Based on their relationship with the teacher, we do not want to stop their progress. We want to ensure that they have the supports that they need, and therefore some of them will remain put at Foster. At elementary, students receive specially designed instruction needed without changing campuses to access a continuum of services. Students remain with non-disabled peers throughout their school years. And then in 2018-19, we had 12 elementary campuses with life skills and 8 elementary campuses with SIP. Next year, we will have 20 SLC programs at elementary. 15 of those campuses will only receive students from their zoned areas. The other 5 campuses will only receive students from one other campus. So our elementary students will be able to remain closer to home, and no matter what their disability is, they will not have to change schools to access the program support, other than within those 5 campuses that we talked about. So the district impact for us is that we are shifting our teaching units to 85%. That will now focus specifically on academics. And then also programs should stabilize now, because we've actually moved programs to a location that is close enough to home that we no longer have these long drives that we're hearing about. Next year, Tamaron opens. The Purple Track, again, is an area that we have not been able to do a lot with, just because there's not a lot of space. When I first came to the district, students that attended Huggins attended McNeil Elementary to receive support and services. Since then, we've opened programs at Lindsay as well as Hubenack, and they are closer to home. Every year, we try very hard to get kids closer to home. We do have exceptions all the time in terms of what that may look like. And when we do make decisions, we do talk with transportation to look at their routes, because one thing that we've learned is that when you have a program out like Beasley or Huggins, it's very difficult for the buses to get students in a timely manner to school. So we have to be very careful in terms of different things like that. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That was very impressive.
Well, I'd like to make a comment.
Well, we're going to have some
Whenever y'all
questions.
go down the line.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll let all, because I have a lot of comments.
Okay.
All right.
I'll just start with 5 years.
Are there questions?
So y'all go
With
ahead and
questions.
ask.
Any questions so far that you? I have one. All students are offered the bus transportation or not?
Yes, but it's in our committee's decision in terms of which bus. Meaning, if it's special transportation, that is a related service that the ARD committee has to agree on.
Okay. So as each child is placed into a specific program, the needs of the child and where they need to go. Now that we're opening more of these programs in more schools, that time frame has shortened, but you do work with the parents and transportation.
Absolutely.
And everybody, so that the child can have the least stressful movement as possible. Okay.
I had a question when you were discussing dyslexia and the changes, I guess, from TEA. So my understanding is that Lamar, when they're determining if the child is eligible for special education, they use the achievement discrepancy model, basically determining whether there's a difference between the child's intelligence and their achievement in school. So not every child that has dyslexia is going to be does not qualify for a specific learning disability, right? That is possible.
Not according to the state. What we have been told is that students who have dyslexia should meet the criteria for a specific learning disability. Now, we do not use a discrepancy model. We look at patterns of strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
But the discrepancy model is something we have not used in probably the last 10 years.
Okay. I know for a fact, because I have a child at home.
Yes, sir.
That has dyslexia, and she was told that she does not have a specific learning disability. So there are obviously some students out there, and I don't know if there's a miscommunication among the
Right.
department, but it's possible. So my question is, if a child goes to a private evaluator, it's determined that they have dyslexia. They bring that evaluation in, the clock starts for the 15 days. If it didn't automatically initiate a referral to get an FIE, full independent evaluation. They would potentially be able to get a 504 meeting pretty quickly and get service implemented, right?
Yes.
But now, because we're making it so that every child that possibly has dyslexia has to get a full evaluation, has to have an FIE, that whole process is going, and it's taking months, maybe up to a semester away from that child where they could be receiving services, right?
Well, the purpose of that is because we have to also ensure that the student doesn't have a more pervasive reading disability. So we're not doing it to delay services, but to ensure that we're appropriately providing the support and services that the student needs.
Right. I guess my point is that, and I'm all for that, we should make sure that the child's getting all the supports that they need, but the end result of that is that the child, which in the past, when dyslexia was considered 504 eligibility, would have received services sooner, it is significantly delaying the services because while the student is waiting to get tested, which can be 15 days plus 45 days plus 30 days, there's no services being provided, right?
And that is true. That is true. If we find that we have delayed unnecessarily, then we do offer compensatory services. We look at what type of compensatory services are needed for students. That was part of the strategic plan review as well. But again, as a school district, we have to ensure that we evaluate thoroughly, and that is part of that process.
What kind of when you say compensatory services, would that mean? So say, again, child with dyslexia, would they receive just, if in their 504 meeting or in their ARD, they were supposed to receive 3 days of pullout, they would receive 4 days of pullout for a shortened period and just kind of try to catch up? How does that work?
Well, it just depends. So what we did this summer for some of our students with dyslexia, they came to a summer program and they were provided their intervention over the summer. So it's in addition to the school year. That's typically what we do because students are too tired sometimes to stay after school for additional services.
Once upon a time, I guess TEA is changing their mind, we were told that you really could not test for dyslexia with kindergarten and first graders because they did not show enough where they hadn't been in school long enough to show a lot of non-growth.
Right.
So we sat with, and we, as teachers, did what we know we could do until we could get them tested and services. So TA has changed and said these children need to be tested now. So what?
Well, they don't say we have to test. What they say is we have to do a screening.
So what type of screening did y'all find that is actually identifying these young people?
Well, what we are using currently is the TPRI inventory, not the screening, but the actual inventory. But the way it's written is you do your best to look at all the areas identified in the dyslexia handbook because they are very specific on what areas you have to look at.
So if a child does not actually show, they're still worrying, but they don't show true dyslexia, are they followed until they're older, and can they then be tested or have some services?
Those students would move into our RTI process.
Okay, so they're just not saying they're fine and go back in the classroom and...
Not at all.
Because that young, you're not sure.
And that's why the state is developing the MTSS information, because they want to make it clear to all school districts, because it depends on what school district you go to, what that process might look like.
So everybody's not on the same page throughout the state, is what you're saying?
Not according to the strategic plan.
Okay.
So with the amount of growth that we have right now, I mean, we saw your charts, obviously, but I mean, we know what our projected growth is for the next 10 years. I think an additional 20,000 students within the next 10 years. And to Alex's point about the, let's say dyslexia. In most situations, would you say that the same people doing the testing are the ones that are giving the instruction, or?
It's a combination because our reading interventionists provide the instructional component, the intervention. But they are working with our educational diagnosticians to do the evaluations.
Do the testing.
Yes.
Okay.
They should be, okay.
Well, one of the things I always hear is that part of the delay, and 45 days is the ceiling. Ideally, we'd like to do it in less than that.
Absolutely.
Part of what I hear is that there's just not enough diagnosticians, LSSPs.
In the entire state.
Right.
Yes.
Is that inhibiting us getting these churned out quicker, and so we can start getting kids services quicker?
Well, we contract out, and so it's just a different year. This year was very, very different for us. We have not had issues in terms of indicator 11, which is our accountability. If we are late, we're late on 3 out of 700, not, more than that. But when you have 1,900 that you have to complete, all due maybe in the same time frame, because sometimes when campuses, we had a meeting today and they talked about, when I have time, I do them all at one time. Well, if you have consent all on the same day, they're due at the same time. It's just a very different year. And we've planned a little bit differently for next year. We've paired art specialists with diagnosticians in most cases, so diagnosticians can test most of the time and not just hold arts.
Can you go back to the slide where you show this exponential growth and how many students are in special education this year?
I was wondering if we could get a copy of this.
Yeah, if we could get a copy of this.
Absolutely. Right here.
So, and then I think that you also said that we went from 421 staffing units to 451.5 staffing units.
Right.
So if you go back to the last one, are 30 staffing units going to be able to handle an additional 1,200 students in special education?
Well, some of our seniors have graduated, and so this date is from May 30, or it's May 30th of 2019. But part of our staffing units that we allocated towards behavior are now in the instructional side. And so that is how we're able to do that. Also, Dr. Randall, as well as Human Resources, we work together. After the first week of school, we look at the students who show up, and if we find that there's additional support needed, then we address it at that time.
Well, I know how busy they are, and y'all are, as you know.
Yes, I do.
I see it firsthand every night. She won't turn the damn lamp off. But so that concerns me. I know we're opening more schools, and we see the growth. We know what the projected growth is. We were already understaffed, and to your point, we hired an additional this much, and they jumped this much in a year. We'll see what 2020 is going to do.
Yes, we're hoping it doesn't look like this year.
Well, and I think in the operational audit, it said something to the effect of like in the next 10 years that we expect there to be a 60% growth in the number of students that are in special education. And it looks like with the changes from TEA, we're almost there. And so it's going to be even more than that. And so I don't know how with those staffing levels, we're going to be able to keep up with that, even if we rework on the instructional side. So I'm from the Fulshire area, and one of the things, especially when I was campaigning, I heard is people are kind of frustrated with having to come down to Rosenberg.
Absolutely.
Which is not an easy thing to do every day, especially if you have a student in elementary school and school starts at 7:30 and they're having to get on the road before 7, especially a child with special needs.
Right.
How is life for these students with the SLCs and the social emotional support campuses? How is life going to change for those students starting this year?
Well, at Huggins, instead of just having a PASS program, they will have the SESC program that allows them that full continuum of services, so they would no longer have to drive to Rosenberg.
And so Lindsay students would go
They
to
could go to Huggins for behavior support, yes. And when Lindsay opened, we put every program that we could at Lindsay. They actually have them all right now. And so we are able to, get, again, everybody closer to home as we open schools and we have more space.
You said everybody was at Lindsay. They're
Meaning programs, the centralized programs.
so those programs are at Lindsay now, but they're going to move over to Huggins, or they're also at Lindsay?
What we look at is once Tamaron opens, we'll look at the home schools of all of the kids. If the kids at Lindsay, if some of those kids homeschool now, Tamaron, we look at how many, and we may move that program to Tamaron so that they're at their home school. But even in that situation, if a kiddo is in 4th grade going to 5th grade, we allow that 5th grader to stay put. We don't move kids unnecessarily. We try not to.
Are there any schools where the issue, so it seems like there's two issues about determining whether to put one of the programs on a campus. It's either one, there's not enough students that require that service,
Right.
or two, there's not space.
Right.
Are there any campuses where there are enough students that for the program, but there's not enough space? The only issue is we don't have enough space.
The only campus right now that I can think of, maybe Thomas, but we don't really know because we're not sure who's going to show up at Thomas with Culver opening. So that's the only campus.
So the campuses that don't have the SLC or the SESC, the issue is most likely both. They either don't have the demand or and they don't have the space.
Could be.
You ready?
Okay, I'm cooled down now.
Okay.
You have some questions?
I'm going to try, but I do know I can make a comment. I think we need to overall owe an apology to these parents. I have, in 37 years, more than 37 years, experienced with special ed students, special needs. I've been through the arts. And in all those years, today, or actually before I read this, realize nothing has changed. And that really, really bothers me. It took 5 years of TEA to come into the districts and now telling us what we knew all these years. We don't have enough teachers for special ed students. We have too long. Why does it take 3 months to evaluate a student? I mean, between the three, I'm going to write it down here. You have 15 days for the parents to make the referral, for y'all to do it. But if you add all those school days, that hasn't changed in all these years. It takes 3 months. I have personal experience in my dealings with the early childhood students. 3 months. And I really think that we need to figure out how to shorten that. That's very frustrating for these parents. At the same time, I understand you're shorthanded. You just don't have enough people to do all of this in a shorter period of time. I can, when I have a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 4-year-old come to me, within 2 weeks, I know if there's something going on with that child. I may not know what it is, but I already know from my experience. And yet we're taking 3 months to evaluate, say, someone that has dyslexia. It may take them that long. Why do we have to take that long? It's like dyslexia. Can we not take what the doctors come in and evaluate? A lot of parents go to their own individual ones. Mm-hmm. My understanding is that we take it, but we still have to do our own evaluations.
We have guidelines for our full individual evaluations, and sometimes outside evaluations don't meet that criteria. If it does meet the criteria, then yes, we can accept that outside evaluation. But it just doesn't always happen that way.
Is that a TEA criteria?
IDEA.
IDEA.
Right. It's
Okay.
a comprehensive evaluation.
Right.
And so we can't take a couple of subtests from a particular test. They want like the entire comprehensive evaluation with all subcomponents. So It is a process. I understand the timeline is frustrating, but the reason why it exists is because they want it to be comprehensive.
Without accepting a doctor's evaluation, who I would think has a little bit more experience
Not
in
necessarily.
some of the fields. Not
Sometimes.
not all of it, but in some of them. When you had said that the IBC program, I'm a little confused on that. That is behavioral.
Right.
And we're going to have a separate building set up, an ALC for IBC students?
No, ma'am. That's CIBC. And
Am I getting those two mixed up?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
I
for more
apologize for
intensive
that.
behaviors.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
You actually take those students and go to other campuses rather than leaving them where they are. And you said that's because of numbers?
In most cases. Again, at secondary, most of the programs exist. It's for behavior. And we started this process 2 years ago when we added IBC to all of our high schools except for Fulshire High School. Okay? But at the elementary level, we have some campuses that have 0 kids that require that level of support. We have some that only have 1 or 2 kids. So what we try to do is place the program where the higher numbers are so that we are not moving students unnecessarily. But we can't place the self-contained program at every campus because it doesn't warrant that. And that is a part of the IDEA, and it has been litigated, most recently in ER versus Spring Branch ISD. It is about making sure that you have a continuum of services, but at the same time, they understand we have a fiscal responsibility.
And that's why you combined the program.
Yes.
So that you could get more numbers and now have them all on all campuses.
And we can provide
On 20 of the
continuum.
campuses.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But that's for SLC.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
If we were able to provide you with more teachers to go to these campuses, would we still have to have that particular number of students on that campus, or would that teacher be kind of able to take care of more children other than the behavioral ones?
If they are funded through special education, they can only work with students who are in the program. We cannot support students outside of that program, not when they're in self-contained environments. In our inclusion classrooms, we have more flexibility because they are all working together. The IDEA allows for that. But we cannot have a behavior teacher that is funded through special education supporting general ed students who may have some behaviors.
That's, okay. All right. I have another question. Would you describe to me what Pegasus is and what the purpose is and how it got started?
Well, I'm not really sure how it got started because I wasn't here, but I can tell you it is our inclusive program for our early childhood students. It allows for them to have non-disabled peers to interact with and actually learn from in terms of language models. So all of our Pegasus students, which are general ed students, go through a speech screening to ensure that they don't have any speech deficits because they do serve as models for our students with disabilities.
And what kind of a testing program do you have for that, for those students to qualify to be in Pegasus?
On the general ed side,
Mm-hmm.
it's a speech screening. That's the only assessment that is required.
Okay.
Because they're not in special education.
Do you bus those children?
No, we do not. Well, let me not say that.
Yes.
We do. We do in the evenings because Pegasus children are children of our employees. And so we will bus them from their campus within their track. So for example, at Frost, we have a Pegasus program. And if the parents work in that gold track, then we will transport the students.
How old is the youngest?
In Pegasus,
I'm sorry, I said that the wrong way. What is the youngest age that you bus?
3-year-olds.
You bus 3-year-olds on the bus to go to separate schools?
Yes, ma'am. Parent permission. And we do have aides on
3-year-olds?
buses. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I will go back again. I get emotional because, like I said, it has happened that we are not, and it's not just this district, it's the entire state. It is just unconscionable for me to say things haven't changed. I'm glad to see that we got put into this position of being forced to look into this and you combining. I know your work is going to be hard, but I'm not going to want to wait another 5 years to see if this works or not. I've got 2 more years on this board, and I think I've finally hit me that I want to watch. I want to see improvement. I don't want these kids being moved around.
Well, hopefully this will fix it. That is the goal.
This sounds like a good program.
This is
so
exactly
I wish
the
you
goal.
luck, and
thank you so much.
you need something, you know, you got to holler to us.
And you do have parent meetings with, where they can come, because I know I've been to some and you've been to some.
Yes.
And going back to, I think, kind of what we heard today, all parents get that information and know when the meetings are?
We try
and
very
can
hard.
Okay.
We do send out the invite to the teachers of the students, as well as our coordinators send reminders to campuses. Our actual special education parent advisory committee posts them on their website. We have the dates of the meeting on our website as well.
And I guess one suggestion would be if you're in an art and you see tempers going, maybe make sure those parents are more aware of when those meetings are. Are they already scheduled for the year? Or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I missed the first.
We haven't had one yet this year.
Oh, good.
Well, but I just think the more information and more visible
I agree.
and
And I
transparent
think
we
that we
are.
can improve in that area
And
always.
letting them see just what you said today, and that's why I think that we're conscious of our faults and where we want to go next. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A couple more questions. One of the things that you mentioned is that if it meets our criteria for an outside evaluation, that the district might be able to accept that.
Yes, sir.
Is that codified in some sort of operating procedure somewhere?
I would have to check on that. I'm not sure where we have that notated.
Is there some sort of standard operating procedure that all of the compliance coordinators, art specialists, that they can go to, and that's their Bible for determining what to do in a particular situation?
Yes, sir.
And what is that called? What is that?
It's just their handbook. It's a diagnostician or assessment staff handbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that online somewhere?
I don't think so.
Okay. And so that only applies to diagnosticians?
Well, LSSPs, any assessment staff.
Okay. And also art specialists, so if a situation arises in a meeting, it says what to do in that particular situation for the art specialist too?
Not necessarily that detailed. We have compliance coordinators that assist with art specialists as well as campus level staff. If there are any, concerns within an art meeting, they work with the campus to ensure that, they know what to do or whatever the next steps are.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at, and I saw online just through randomly searching, there was like operating guidelines, and it looked like it might not have been complete. It didn't have the table of contents, didn't have page numbers, or some things struck out. I would think in an organization like this and the special education department that has a lot of compliance requirements, that there should be some sort of manual for everybody. And if this situation comes, this is the place that you go, just like any company or corporation, but that doesn't exist?
Well, no, we do have our operation, the manual that's required by the state. What you're seeing is when they make changes in the handbook, the way that the company, because we pay for the operating manual, they cross out the changes so that people can see what has changed. It's something we can take a look at if we need to use something different, but we actually pay a company so that we can ensure that we get updates as legislation changes, and we don't ever miss out on having what we need.
Would that be something that you could provide to the board, a copy of that? Just because as I was going through it, if we're paying for that, I mean, the table of contents doesn't have page numbers on it. It has things struck through. There's large gaps, and I think that the manual should be something that parents should be able to look at and say, what's going to happen in this situation? What do I do? What's the district's take on this particular issue? And then second, the district employees and special education department should be able to look at, and it's the go-to manual. That's what to expect. The new dates for the CPAC meetings are, I don't believe that those are on the website, so.
They may not be right now because we are revamping the website.
Okay.
To include new programs, as well as we are looking at, based on our feedback from our parents, what do we need to have so that it is a useful tool, not just to parents, but also our staff. And so in our administrative training, we receive feedback from administrators on what we could do, and so we're in the process of updating that, and it should be up before school starts.
Okay. Could you also include on, if you're redesigning it, just the minutes from the CPAC meeting?
Oh, okay.
I think there was a PowerPoint from a couple of years ago, but there were no minutes, and I know parents, especially parents of children with special needs, it's often difficult for them to make it to those meetings, and so that might be helpful for them. In a future meeting, and I know that you're going to give a presentation next month and the next month, could you provide us an update, a detailed update on the 9 recommendations in the operational audit? Are some of those still ongoing, or on the Gantt chart are those?
They're ongoing. Some of them we're still working on, absolutely.
Because we have got other presentations tonight. So you have one more question?
I
Because she
just
has
had a
one more
couple-
question. Okay.
I just had a couple more
Okay.
questions. Could you also provide the next time or before that, when we go into closed session and we look at teacher turnover, special education, and I know that that's typical for special education in any district, would it be possible to provide maybe at each campus the average teacher tenure of how long they've been there, and then what the turnover rate is district-wide for our special education teachers?
Okay. I will definitely work with HR on that.
And then the last request that I have is, it's difficult to follow if a child goes to Navarro and they need an SLC. Do they go to Navarro? Do they go to another campus? If a child goes to Lindsay Elementary on the other side of the
Feeder
district,
patterns.
where do they go? Would it be possible to provide just a rundown of SLC? Lindsay, SLC, they go here. SESC, they go to Huggins.
Right.
And just a rundown of where all the students, depending on what their home campus is, whether they would be at their home campus, or if they would be somewhere else, and then if they go somewhere else, where that would be.
Yes, we have that.
Okay.
I'm just curious, IDEA and 504, which is the biggest program for y'all right now, as far as the kids?
Numbers? IDEA.
It is still the largest?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And it took off this year. We were closer, but this year, as you can see, we jumped pretty significantly. Last year, we were at 2,900 students, and 504, we had about 2,600 students. Wasn't what? But
So last year it was about even?
almost,
And this year, IDEA escalated?
yes.
Because
We
okay.
moved a lot of kids out of 504 into special education as part of that review.
And that was that dyslexia, because it used to be in 504?
Well, we still provide support and services through 504. We did not reevaluate students who were already under 504
Okay.
with dyslexia. We did not make those kids go through another evaluation. So that wasn't impacted. It was if the students were not making progress on the intervention, then we looked at if there was a more pervasive reading disability.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, we now have STAR results.
Yay. You get to hear this.
Actually, we will do a presentation on STAR results and accountability on Thursday. We will receive our official results tomorrow so that we can have a discussion with the official numbers.
Water safety.
You should have received the information item that I presented at a time, and I'm just here to answer any questions that you might have regarding our fourth grade swim program and the extension of that we do in the summertime as part of our American Red Cross swim program.
You began this at Seguin Early Childhood Wales Tales?
Yes, ma'am.
And this past year, has it been the first time they've?
Yes, ma'am. We did that program for parents, not for students.
Correct.
That was an offering that we did for the parents of the students at Seguin. We invited them in. Meredith May, who is our aquatics programs manager, provided the programming. Wales Tales itself is geared towards the students, or the children, I should say. But she also did a safety program for parents that same morning.
Is it possible, or working through this, something like this could be shown to maybe PTO presidents or PTA presidents, that they might want to have a meeting using this same information?
Yes, ma'am, and that's part of the reason Meredith piloted it with that group at Seguin when she was asked to come in and speak there.
Okay.
We could take some of the components of the program, put them together into a 30-minute or 1-hour presentation. We've got a couple different varieties of media we could use to make that available to our campuses, to our teachers, and to our parent groups.
Yeah, because without the parents, it's not.
Yes,
You've
ma'am.
got to have
That's a
the-
critical component of water safety with children.
So I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
if we offered it to a body that were parents would possibly go to the meetings if they knew what that was, but maybe bring those people in and show it to them and see if they would be willing to do the program on their campuses.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay.
So was the Wales Tales video for kids? Is that geared towards students?
Yes, sir. It was a two-part program. The Wales Tales program from the American Red Cross is a video and curriculum that the American Red Cross developed targeting younger students, not our fourth grade students, but younger students. That was presented while water safety tips were presented towards parents.
Okay, so about how long is the video? Do you know?
There are several small component videos. Meredith put several together to probably make between 16 and 20 minutes of video altogether. The videos are short, roughly 3 minutes apiece, and I believe when I looked there were 8 to 10 of them.
Okay. And then is there teaching in between from the facilitator?
Yes, there are. There are curriculum worksheets. There's a whole curriculum that goes with it that you could stretch out over any period of time that you had available with the young children.
Okay. What's the shortest that you could frame it into, and then how long could it possibly get?
One of the things we would have to do with the curriculum, because it's varied, it talks about things like lakes and oceans and boating safety, as well as backyard and neighborhood pools. So one of the things we would want to do is go through the curriculum and look at what's the most applicable to the majority of our students and pull out those components of the curriculum and then put it together, and we could probably get it down to 30 minutes for the students.
Is it something that you have to be Red Cross certified to do, or could we provide this to teachers and they can present it to their students?
One of the things we're exploring with the Community Relations Department is ways we could roll out a video module to all of our teachers through one of our multimedia learning resources. So it may be a Canvas class that Meredith teaches that then our teachers could log on and access in their classrooms to present to their students. So she would become a virtual instructor, which would make it easier and take up less of the water safety instructor's time, make it more flexible for our classroom teachers as well.
And then the parent component, do you know about how many parents went to the presentation at Seguin?
I don't have that count in front of me, but I can find out for you.
It was just something optional that, how do you get parents to go to a water safety presentation?
She worked with the campus principal who requested the program for some parents at her campus. One of the things we've talked about doing, we're exploring a partnership with the local YMCAs through a SAW grant that they got. Safety Around Water Program grant, where some of their water safety instructors will come in as volunteers to help with our fourth grade swim instruction this school year to take down our student to staff ratio. But then we'd like to partner with them in the spring to do kind of a water safety day at our natatoriums where we could actually open them up to the community and maybe make it kind of a targeted day to get parents in with their younger students especially, perhaps in an evening or on a Saturday.
I think especially with the number of accidents that we've had, especially this summer, and especially in our neck of the woods, I think that, parent training is incredibly important, but I don't think that we can depend on that, and that we should do whatever we can in order to ensure that our kids are equipped, to be safe around water. And if our fourth graders are getting all of that training, but we've got kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders that I think could benefit from that as well.
Thank you.
And the next item is full-day pre-K implementation plan. He's fixing it.
Good evening, Madam President and Board of Trustees. I am Terry Mossage, the Chief Academic Officer. I have my team also with me.
Now come on up.
During this presentation. It's going to be okay. We have also, who has been highly involved in these discussions, is Diane Parks, our Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education, Katie Marchena, who is the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and Gloria Stewart Cooper, the Director of our Accelerated Language Programs. And so, as well as you see Tiffany Mathis, who you just saw shortly, a little bit ago, also up here for this presentation. And so what we're going to try to do today is provide you some information on full-day pre-kindergarten. Many of you do know that in the end of May, the state legislature, part of the HB3, only a portion, there's a lot to that law, was the mandate of full-day pre-K in all districts across the state of Texas. And so hopefully I'm going to be able to provide you with some information this evening to provide some clarity as well as an outline of some action steps that we are looking at moving forward. So our presentation is going to be in three areas. Number one, the current state of pre-K throughout the district. Key expectations of the law as we see them currently right now. Please remember that with HB3, there's a lot of articulation that is also happening at this time that are going to give us continued information as we move forward. Okay. As well as our plan for district implementation as we set forth for the remainder of hopefully 1920 as we look at also 2020-21. So what is the current status of pre-K throughout LCISD? Well, first of all, before we begin talking about what is the status, we want to be clear on what the state says is the eligibility for pre-K. Number one is a student needs to be unable to speak and comprehend the English language, and that is determined by the English Language Proficiency Test and an LPAC committee. You also are economically disadvantaged, coded economically disadvantaged, homeless, child of an active duty member of the Armed Forces of the United States, a child of a member of Armed Forces of the U.S. who was injured or killed while serving on active duty, is or has been in conservatorship of the Department of Family and Protective Services, and be the child of a person eligible for the Star of Texas Award as a peace officer, firefighter, or emergency medical first responder. And that comes through the governor's office. So as we begin, let's talk about the current piece of staffing for pre-K as we know it within LCISD. Right now, according to the state of Texas, there's an 11-to-1 ratio. And so there is a one certified teacher in a classroom as well as one paraprofessional, and in a Title campus, they have to be highly qualified paraprofessionals. That equals that for every pre-K classroom, there is only 22 kids in a classroom with one teacher and one paraprofessional. Another highlight for LCISD as we begin to look at pre-K is that we do provide transportation for pre-kindergarten students. In 1920, we began planning for this last year in the spring of 2019 to begin transportation for Seguin Early Childhood Center students to and from home. Our half-day programs also are provided transportation in the half-day programs to the campus and then as well home to the campus and at home depending upon the morning session or the afternoon sessions. It is important to point out that our surrounding districts do not provide transportation. So that is what we believe is a positive for LCISD. With that, Lamar has offered pre-K at Seguin Early Childhood Learning Center since 2012, meaning we have offered full-day pre-K at Seguin Early Child Center since 2012. When you look at looking at the coding of economically disadvantaged, what we ended up doing is we were looking at planning for this. We began to look at 3-year averages of kindergarten students because that was more of a constant number because kindergarten, most kids are coming there. And so we took is the information just with the economically disadvantaged code, not the other identifiers. If you were to look at all of the elementary campuses that are served at Seguin, Bowie, Jane Long, Smith, Travis, Taylor Ray, Pink, or Jackson, that would equate to 465 students that would be eligible just with the ED code. Our half-day programs, particularly at our other Title I campuses, such as Beasley, Williams, Meyer, Velasquez, who also serves Dickinson and Campbell students, McNeil, Cora Thomas, and Arredondo, that would equate, again, with 409 students just with the ED code. And then we have our non-Title campuses. At Huggins, Austin is also being served with Frost. Austin was originally served at UBNAC, but is opening their own unit this year because of the numbers that need to be serviced at UBNAC at this time. Hutchison has a half-day program. UBNAC serving Adolphus, Bentley, Lindsay, and then Culver will also serve Carter. Again, looking at 3-year averages and looking at the economically disadvantaged code, we're looking at 230 students that could be eligible. When we look at general education pre-K and we look at staffing, at Seguin we currently have 17 teachers and 17 paras. At our Title campuses, for our Title half-day programs, we currently have 9 teachers and 9 paras. And at our non-Title campuses, we have 7.5, both of teachers and paras. And that equals a number of 33.5 teachers and paras throughout the system. If we are going to convert our half-day programs to a full-day programs, just putting those two together, we are anticipating needing 16.5 highly qualified teachers or certified teachers with 16.5 paras at this time. When we look at program offerings across the district, there's basically 2 offerings that are offered, is the ESL support, and then we have 3 bilingual programs at the Seguin Early Childhood Center as well as Beasley and then Culver. We also have what is actually the state of Texas has changed the name of PPCD to the Special Education Early Childhood Programs that Ms. Mathis also mentioned in her presentation. And these are the campuses: Adolphus, Arredondo, Bentley, Carter, Culver, Frost, UBNAC, Jackson, Lindsay, Long, Ray, Smith, Velasquez, and Williams all have these early special education, early childhood programs. They are staffed with 1 teacher and 3 paras. So as we begin, what we have done for easy reading for all of you is if this is a TEA mandate, we have highlighted TEA at one portion of each of those slides. And so when you look at TEA, broadcast a information session on full-day pre-K on July 18th, 2019, to provide us greater information of all about pre-K and the expectations of the rollout throughout the state. So the question is, when we're looking at our PPCD programs, or what is now going to be called our early childhood special education programs, whatever we do for our general education will have an impact in our special education with caveats. And those caveats will be with the ARD committees with the determination of frequency, location, duration of those services that the student will receive during the full instructional day, unless the ARD committee determines that a shorter day is appropriate. So a lot of those decisions, though a student might be eligible, the ARD committee could say that this child should not be served in a full-day program. But if they can be served in a full-day program, then the ARD committee also, they would be eligible, meet the eligibility, and then the ARD committee could ARD them into a program of that nature. So what are the key expectations of the law as we currently know in regards to pre-K, pre-kindergarten? Number one is that all eligible 4-year-olds will have full-day pre-kindergarten. That is the state expectation moving forward. High-quality pre-kindergarten components apply to all eligible 4-year-olds from the slide that I showed you, beginning with eligibility of all the different eligibility qualifications for a child to participate. And pre-kindergarten eligibility remains the same. So the law did not change that, they kept that constant. So the other change in the law had to do with the number of minutes. Effective September 1st, 2019, minutes for pre-kindergarten are 75,600. Also, that time will include intermissions, meals, rest time, and recess for students. Our student attendance accounting handbook will also be updated to reflect those changes at the district level. So what does that mean as we look at Seguin and our full-day program? Well, as of beginning this school year, that day for those children will go from 7:30 a.m. to 2:40 p.m. to comply with the TEA expectation. The early education allotment. According to, again, as we start learning more about the HB3, we also know that schools receive various allotments, or school districts receive various allotments. The early education allotment was one of those. So HB3 established an early education allotment for an additional 0.10 weight for each student in an ADA in the areas of kindergarten through 3rd grade. And for students who are educationally disadvantaged or economically disadvantaged or limited English proficient, a student who is both will generate a funding weight of 0.2, so more funds will come to help support the education of those children. The only piece that is expected, not only, but one of the most important pieces that is expected of these funds is that they must be used to support implementing early literacy and mathematics proficiency plans that lead to the improved 3rd grade proficiency. So what are the high quality kindergarten components? One area is curriculum. The other area has to do with student progress monitoring, class size ratios of 11:1, teacher qualifications, family engagement, kindergarten readiness data, and program evaluation. So let's begin with the curriculum. So when we look at the pre-kindergarten curriculum, it must be aligned with the 2015 Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines that articulate certain things in classrooms that should be expected to prepare a kid for their kindergarten experience. When we look at the student progress monitoring in pre-K, we know that we have to measure 5 primary developmental domains: emergent literacy reading, emergent literacy writing, language and communication, health and wellness, mathematics, and it must be listed on the Commissioner's list of approved pre-kindergarten assessment instruments from 17 to 2021. In LCISD, we use the Children's Learning Institute, the CLI, to assess the required domains in English and in Spanish. So what are the teacher qualifications? They must be certified under the TEC Chapter 21 and have one of the following additional certifications outlined in this next slide. For LCISD, majority of those that have additional qualifications are in option 4, has a degree in early childhood education or special education early childhood, or a non-ECE degree with 15 units of early childhood specific coursework, or option 7, completes 30 hours of early childhood specific professional development annually, with 15 or 30 hours being in a mentoring coaching relationship until 150 hours are documented. So once again, kind of going back, a teacher must be certified by the state of Texas and then also have one of these additional certifications. The family engagement plan that we have implemented at Seguin Early Childhood Center is composed of many different areas. Its goal is to develop, implement, and make available, facilitate family-to-family support, establish a network of community resources, increase family participation in the decision-making process, equip families with tools to enhance and extend their learning, develop staff skills and evidence-based practices that support families in meeting their children's learning benchmarks, as well as evaluating family engagement efforts and use evaluations for continuous improvement. Local education agencies, us, LCISD, must select and implement a method of evaluation. LCISD currently evaluates using our state rubric that is provided by TEA. We also use student progress monitoring data and make results of the program evaluation available to all parents. Normally that is posted on the website. Also, in the uploading of data information, this is Brian Moore's area. We have certain information pieces that are brought into these specific systems that come to culminate in our PEIMS reporting. So demographic data, enrollment and half-day or full-day information, sources of funding, class size ratio, type of curriculum, student progress monitoring tool and results, kindergarten readiness data, teacher qualifications, program evaluation, and the family engagement plan. HB3 added new elements to that. Update and add instructional program type code for pre-kindergarten will also be expected. Full day waiver indicator code, and the waivers we will be talking about shortly. Pre-kindergarten school type code and pre-kindergarten funding source code for early education allotment. So again, what are some of the frequently asked questions that we know from the state of Texas? If I do not currently offer pre-kindergarten, am I required to do so? Well, according to the state of Texas, HB3 did not change the law on whether pre-kindergarten must be offered, only the nature of pre-kindergarten if offered. So if a campus had 15 kids, the state was required to offer at least a half day. What the state is coming in is saying instead of a half day, you must now offer a whole day. Parents are not required to enroll students in pre-K. However, once enrolled, attendance is required. The next question is full-day high-quality pre-kindergarten required for all pre-kindergarten students? If you are providing pre-kindergarten for eligible 4-year-olds, then the format of that pre-K must now be full day and must meet the high-quality requirements, which we just kind of showed in previous slides. An exemption may be applied for if an LEA would need to construct facilities or fewer children would be served, such as in our situation currently right now, where we have a number of kids and we have a number of staff. And so by going full day, there would not be the ability to serve the number of kids that we currently have. The law did not change pre-kindergarten eligibility. The Foundation School Program funds are available for eligible students For non-eligible students, districts in the future may offer pre-kindergarten and may charge tuition if the district chooses. So how is and what is the exemption process for full-day pre-kindergarten? Number one, the state said effective September 1st, they would require that all pre-kindergarten would be a whole entire a day. And so a waiver request to receive an exemption will be, according to TEA, available from TEA no later than January 1st, 2020, but not likely available till well after the start of the school year. Yes, the law was passed at the end of May. We received a lot of thorough information on July 18th as we continue to plan. They're expecting September 1st, and the exemption process for us to apply for the waiver will be made available on January 1st, 2020, and will be due no later than March 2nd, 2020. Also, applications will be due, well, I said that, approved or denied by program staff within 30 days of that submission. And school districts can be provided a exemption for 1, 2, 3 years with one renewal that could last up to 3 additional years. Now, what the state did say in their key point, and this is important, compliance in year 1 may be difficult for many districts, and exemptions will be granted for that year if districts need them. But exemptions will be granted beyond year 1 only when districts demonstrate good faith attempts to comply with the new pre-kindergarten guidelines. So what does that look like according again to TEA? For the first year, when we are looking at applying for an exemption process, we would begin to gather data to inform method of providing full-day pre-kindergarten, solicit and consider proposals at a public meeting for partnerships with eligible early learning centers. And after receiving and considering those partnership proposals, we would make a decision to do 1 or 2 of the things following: establish partnerships with eligible early learning centers and/or construct, repurpose, or lease new space or issue bonds to construct or repurpose space. And in 2021, with the waiver for 1 year, that will, with the application being available in January of 2020, we would begin offering full-day pre-kindergarten for all eligible 4-year-old students or apply for an exemption renewal. So, what is required? An LEA may not receive an exemption unless the LEA has solicited and considered at a public meeting the following: proposals for partnerships with public or private entities regarding offering full-day pre-kindergarten for eligible 4-year-old students. For these partners, early learning centers must meet one of the following requirements. They must be identified as are a Texas Rising Star program provider with a 3-star certification or higher, are nationally accredited, are a Texas School-Ready participant, and/or meet the section requirements under TEC Code Section 29, which states if a school district contracts with a private entity for the operation of the district's pre-kindergarten program, the program must at a minimum comply with the applicable child care licensing standards adopted by the Department of Protective and Regulatory Services under Section 42042 of the Human Resources Code. So what are the frequently asked questions on this? If a district receives an exemption from providing full-day pre-kindergarten, will they still receive the early education allotment? Yes. The early education allotment funding is not contingent on providing full-day pre-kindergarten. Next question. What does it mean to solicit a pre-K partnership at a public meeting? The state's answer is the agency will be publishing rules to provide more clear guidance on what actions will satisfy this requirement. In all likelihood, at a minimum, there will be a need to be at least one board meeting where the board authorizes a call for partners, and at least one board meeting where the board considers the response. So what are these? Districts can do direct pre-K, or they can go with pre-K partnerships. In addition to that, with direct pre-K, we have no relationship with the outside entities, and we offer that only at LCISD facilities, direct pre-K. There are also partnerships where districts can offer with other partnering organizations that meet the criteria, where a district pre-K can be offered in a licensed care or Head Start facility, and students in those facilities effectively become enrolled in the school district, in addition to being enrolled in the child care and the Head Start program. So they serve both. So our kids could go to them if they're qualified and meet those standards, and then they would be qualified for the early learning center as well as with the district, or at the district level. They can be offered in district facilities, but the partner organizations like Head Start, they could staff or otherwise support those classrooms. So the outside organizations bringing staff in to the campuses is also a model. So what are those public partnership requirements? Well, number one, public-private partnerships have been optional for districts for years. HB 3 makes 2 changes that require districts to pursue these partnerships under specific circumstances. Number one, if you're going to apply for an exemption, which I mentioned, and or you're going to expand. And with our growth, this could be a contributing factor moving forward as well, because it states, before a school district or open enrollment charter school may construct, repurpose, or lease a classroom facility or issue bonds for the construction or repurposing of a classroom facility to provide the pre-kindergarten classes. So, with all of that information, as we know it today, what would be our plan? What is our plan moving forward? And as I stated before, there are things that we're currently still investigating, but this is a solid plan moving forward for the time being here, right now. So let's talk about LCISD versus others. Number one, we provide transportation for pre-K. Thus, our numbers of students attending will increase, and most surrounding districts do not offer transportation. We are a growing district with space constraints. We do know that in different areas of town. And our geographic challenges, we have different geographic challenges with transportation and staffing as well. And we have not capped our numbers. Historically, if we have increased pre-K numbers, we have continued to seek employees who are certified to come in. And other districts, how they're implementing it so quickly is they are capping their numbers with the available staff that they have. So as we roll this out in August 2019, which is currently, time extended at Seguin from 7:30 to 2:40, implementation of transportation for pre-K students at Seguin Early Child Center, and then testing will continue for the early English proficiency at all of our elementary campuses. In September 17th, our goal is to come for an action item for a call for pre-K proposals for high qualified early learning centers. We're hopeful that we will be provided some more information from the state by that time period. And on September 20th, we will outreach the community regarding early learning center proposals. It will be the last day to enroll in Seguin Early Childhood Center, and we will be ending the first round of LPACs. And in September 23rd, we will determine additional space at Seguin to open up to other title campuses to begin with, but no transportation at this time would be provided with that current expansion at that point. We use September, and I want to highlight this, is because a lot of times what happens is we get an influx of kids after the September 1st time period. And by the mid-September, we do feel that our enrollment will have stabilized to where we truly are going to be able to begin looking at moving pieces to determine if we need to make any changes to the current plan. So, in November 19th, a board informational item to update on early learning center proposals. We will provide an update of what those proposals provided us. And then our goal for December 2019 would be an action item of approving MOUs with early learning centers to help navigate some of our kids out to our community partners if we cannot serve them at this time. The goal of January 2020 is to continue to work with elementary campuses and identified early learning centers to provide opportunities for high-quality pre-K, both outside of LCISD, inside, continue to work on that, and apply for a one-year exemption from the state with the intention of implementing full-day pre-K district-wide in 2021 for all eligible 4-year-old students. Currently in June, since we began to see the impact of this law, we have begun looking at budgeting so we can look at furniture needs, supplies, technology, and the specialized training pieces that are going to be required for this full implementation. Preparation for space utilization. We do believe that the review of the 18-19 facilities assessment will help garner some additional information for our plan and the rollout. Staffing. We will begin to look at teacher and para recruitment in our general education pre-K, our ESL, bilingual, and special education programs. We will review ARDS for special education pre-K staffing to determine the eligibility so we know the impact of our early childhood special ed programs. We will plan the specialized training and space utilization throughout the district. We will refine the required family engagement plan to ensure that we are prepared to really focus on that, not just in the Seguin area or for the one full day, but across the district. We're really doing an amazing job in our parent component currently. We will continue to plan for pre-K implementation for specials rotations because in elementary, the kids go through rotations, and so we're going to add another class that's going to have to go through those rotations in the area of PE, art, music, and library, which has an impact on all of our elementary campuses. And we will develop a community outreach plan to inform families about pre-K programming and recruit eligible students. Full-day pre-K district-wide in 2021 for all eligible 4-year-old students is our goal. Do you have any questions?
I have a question. Is transportation, if we're not at our school, but we work with a partner, is that going to be provided there? Or is that up to the parents if they choose to go somewhere?
Currently, it would be up to the parent, but that's something we're still going to have to continue to investigate.
And then when you said that, yes, if you, I forget, it was a couple slides ago.
It's okay.
Sorry. If it said, I think you said if you're exempt, you still get the funds?
Yes,
I know that's not the
early allotment.
terminology used,
Yes.
but why would you, because you're preparing for the next year, like with furniture and all that kind of stuff, like why, if you're not doing it, or is it because you're still doing half day?
Because only a portion of that early education allotment goes to pre-K. The other areas are for literacy and reading and math for our K through 3 program as well.
You just wouldn't get the extra component?
We still
That's what
get
you're
the
saying.
ABA
You get-
money, but
okay.
we would, at this point, but there's not going to be any decrease to our to our allotment as we know it right now.
The legislation says may use, and there are 4 areas that can use that funding, of which many of we're already currently using. So it wasn't quite fully funded.
They just made a, what we call unfunded mandate.
That's all for me. Thank you.
What are the reasons a parent send their 4-year-old to pre-K? To learn English, is that the main motivation?
I wouldn't say it's the main reason, but I think I'll bring Gloria. Gloria, could you speak to that? Would you like me to?
Well,
And what is a main reason a parent, based on your experience, would want a kid in pre-K?
we have the 10 domains. The pre-K guidelines are very inclusive of literacy, language, technology, social, emotional. So it benefits all of the students that participate, not only the English learners, but the other 6 groups of students that attend. And we know that early childhood is a key component to literacy and graduating from college. So it's one of the best. I mean, our program serves, right now we have about 850 students. And so there's just a lot of research based on that.
Is there any way to, I don't want this to be a policy, I don't want it to be a law especially. Is there any way to encourage, or maybe the district is already encouraging parents that are utilizing full-day pre-K that have not finished high school to enroll in the 1621 program?
That's absolutely something that we
Because
could
I
begin
think
to
that would be a-
evaluate, that with Project Learn, we do outreach to those communities.
We currently have an ESL program through Project Learn, and we partner up with Wharton County Junior College, and they offer some GED classes for parents in our community that want to participate. So,
And we are also going to be outreaching to our community and for our administrator that deals with our dropout preventions, which is not part of this slide, but he is going to be doing some outreach to try to find certain kids and parents that somehow have left the system to try to get them back and navigate into culminating to a high school diploma.
Good. A lot of information. And good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Finding the
Thank you.
money and the teachers.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
We have two more. The e-cigarette detection system, and then, of course, we're going to close session for safety and security update.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. You're on.
There's no. I don't have a presentation, but let's talk about the e-cigarette vape detection system. You know, vapes have seen a dramatic increase in the last few years, particularly among youth. In December of 2018, the U.S. Surgeon General has declared e-cigarette use epidemics among our youth. And so we've seen a dramatic increase across the board. As a matter of fact, the CDC does an annual survey of tobacco usage among our youth, and between 2017 and 2018, the survey showed that there was a 75% increase in the number of youths that admitted to using tobacco within the last 30 days. That's the largest increase that they have ever seen in all the years that they've been reporting. Now, vaping generally occurs in the schools and private areas, bathrooms and locker rooms that typically are private, cannot be surveyed by normal methods. So there are a couple systems that I've presented some information to y'all about. Sensors that determine whether or not vaping is occurring and can differentiate between nicotine vaping and THC vaping. These sensors, there's some prices that are included in your packet. They're about $1,000 a piece, just under $1,000 per sensor. And so when you're looking at adding these into the number of bathrooms that we have in our schools, each high school has about 42 bathrooms that students and the public would have access to. You do the math on that, and you're looking at about $264,000 to $265,000 that it would cost to equip each of the, or all 5 of our high schools with these devices. This technology is fairly new. We haven't seen a whole lot of school districts in the state of Texas that are using this. There are some out of state that have used it. But in Texas, I've only found one school district that's just completed their testing, and they're getting ready to start looking at purchasing those items.
Which school district was that?
That was Carroll ISD.
Carroll?
Carroll, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They tested, I believe, both sensors, and they're looking at purchasing one of those at this time. It's a fairly small district. They have about 8,000 students, so their cost would be substantially less. All right. Stop there and see if y'all have any questions about the devices or any of the information I've given you so far. All right, thank you.
Oh, wait, are you done?
Oh,
okay, sorry.
Well, unless
I thought you had something else to say, sorry. So if we didn't want to do all the high schools at one time, and we did want to test them out, can we roll a few out?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question?
Could we implement it in a couple high schools versus starting out and see how effective they are?
Sure, I mean, it would be up to the board as to what they would fund and what level they would do that at. I can tell you that we've looked at a couple different options to respond to the increased use of vaping. I know during the last administrative training that we had, I kind of stressed the importance of reinforcing and being consistent in the enforcement of district policy and the use of these devices. But we also need to recognize that we need to do a good job of recognizing what these devices look like. Manufacturers do a very good job of trying to make these devices look like everyday items. They look like regular pens, they look like USB devices, so they're very easy to hide.
Yeah, just like this. A lot of them look like thumb drives that you plug in and
Exactly.
charge.
They look like a
So we're trying to stress the importance of getting staff to recognize these devices and be more.
What is the punishment? Can you tell me, what is the punishment for getting caught with one of these?
You get caught with a tobacco vape, it's usually a Class C misdemeanor, which is usually taken to the municipal court or to the Justice of the Peace Court. So it can be a fine, but the fine doesn't go to the student, it goes to the parent.
Oh.
As a student learning a lesson. So there's different methods, different things that even my officers.
So if my
discuss
kid
with
gets
us.
caught with one, I get in trouble?
Yes, ma'am.
And the student isn't, is it high enough of a school infraction that they would be suspended?
Well, definitely, and that's what Mr. Warren and myself were discussing. We talked with a lot of the administrators over the summer. We still have a couple more meetings to go, but there's a level that you start with students, and this being a Class C offense, it's a very minor infraction. So it's better handled by the administrators at first before my officers get involved. And let's use the levels of administration have to use.
Do you know, is it an automatic suspension or is it discretionary at that level?
That would be discretionary at that level.
I guess we've got the code of conduct.
Yeah.
I just happen to have this.
Discomfort.
Yeah.
Based on the student code of conduct, the level, if it's just tobacco that's in the product, it's usually handled on campus. Suspension is one of the alternatives you can use, but they have to look at all criteria and different factors involved with the student. Do they have a history of discipline issues? If there's a first-time offense, so things of that nature. Usually suspension is not what we want. Maybe in-school suspension may be possible, or some type of detention would be involved.
Thank you.
So is there a way that once, let's say, that school district rolls out or we find other school districts, we can get information before we jump willy-nilly into something that costs, considering we're looking at so much expenditure in the future?
My opinion, I think that would be the best option. Let's wait till some districts try it out, because it's a fairly new mechanism that they're using to detect smoke, and it's really a mist. If you've seen what the vapes are, it's a cloud of mist that comes up.
And they're not all of them smell anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, they don't smell at all.
Well, some of them do.
Well, it detects the particles in the air, it doesn't have anything to do with the smell.
I know, but I'm saying you don't know.
That's one of the items that makes it difficult to detect, though, is that it doesn't have the same odor as regular tobacco would.
I think there are a couple of things that the district would like to see if those things work. One, we've increased the number of times that our drug dogs are on campus, and they're able to detect these devices. And they are also going to be going into classrooms. So the kids will be pulled out, and then the dogs will go in, and if they've got these devices with them, then we are going to address it on the campus, being a little more proactive, as well as if a kid is in the bathroom long enough to smoke, we got a problem.
It's fast.
It's really fast, too. I mean, they don't even have to go in the bathroom to do it. Yeah.
I've been dealing with, over the years, we've had trends from marijuana to all different types, and this fad will also go in a couple of years. It's just the way that it goes about it, but we've got to have a heightened approach to trying to make sure that we address these kids early on. And if a kid is going to the restroom and he's gone for an extended period of time, we need to be checking him out. And that's what the administrators are doing. They're also doing those types of things as well. So, but to answer your question, yes, you can do it on a pilot basis. You can spend $50,000 per campus. There are a number of different ways to try to address this issue of vaping.
Has this not been tested thoroughly, is what you're saying?
It doesn't sound like it has been.
My
Is the-
research, I have not seen it.
I wonder if they would be willing to use this as a test district. They could just donate the equipment and we could test it.
The technology's been around there for a little while, but it's not been used in this manner. I mean, one of the Halo device that is probably the one that's looks like it's got the best long-term capabilities has never been used in a school environment. So it's a new type of technology. We don't know what type of ways that it can be attacked and defeated or give false positives. Where in industry, when it was used, it was used to protect workers from chemical spills and that. So whether or not somebody's going to be able to attack it and defeat it, we haven't seen that yet. And I think kids are pretty innovative in the way that they'll do those things.
Yeah, I would just make a couple of quick points. I know that when it comes to school safety, we're constantly looking at different things. And so we were looking at these devices, and it was actually an information item brought up last time, a request to get information on these things. So we have looked at them to date, but a lot of the strategies we used last year was we took our K-9 units when Dallas became the school safety coordinator, and we created a specific schedule. And we noticed that when we scheduled these drug dog visits at specific times on our campuses, we saw a reduction in the number of students that were getting, for lack of a better term, popped for having vapes and different things. For this upcoming school year, we've already increased our K-9 visits by 33%, and we have them scheduled from the beginning of the year. And Dr. Randall mentioned we're actually going to be going into the classrooms, which we vetted through our secondary principals to see if they were okay with those procedures that we previously implemented. And so when you take what we're doing with our drug dogs, at about $15,000 a year, and how effective that they have been, plus you look at what happened with the Texas legislature and the minimum age for purchasing tobacco going up to 21, we feel like collectively those things, along with working with school safety and RPD, being clear on how we handle tobacco, vaping, and other incidents being out in the hallways between classes, that we feel like looking at how successful these drug dogs were, these K-9 units, at the end of last semester, ramping those up this year might be more cost effective, while we still look to see other districts implementing the technology piece as we head into, say, the next bond issue.
So could we, as a board, have an update maybe after the first semester of how this implementing more drug dogs, more time on campus, to see how it is working so that we can make some good decisions? Like you said, especially with the new bond coming up, if this is something we
Yeah,
want
absolutely.
to see.
I think that we can have a specific presentation if required, but even the monthly reports that Lieutenant Segura provides would show, to let us know month by month, are we seeing an increase?
That's true.
If it's static or if it's decreasing, but we can certainly see what have been the effects of ramping up our K-9 units, because I know anecdotally talking with Sergeant Clark and other folks, they say when you put the dogs on the campuses, the kids know like that, and the fact that you bring them into the campuses, they're being a little bit smarter about what they're bringing to school.
And are these on high school and junior high, or just the high school?
Our K-9 units, they visit our middle schools, junior highs, and high schools.
So all secondary levels, okay.
You say schedule the visits of the K-9 schedule with, when is it posted? You're talking about scheduling
With the principals.
You want to talk about
admin?
No, the only individual that knows when they're scheduled is myself. The campuses aren't aware until we arrive.
Can you also address, there's a program where the kids can turn in their other kids?
Yeah, we have a Crime Stoppers program. The students can report it to any of the faculty on campus, or there's a number they can call.
So I understand the whole Foster baseball team got turned in. So. Hopefully that'll work too.
We have quite a few reports in the year.
Good. What do they make, $25 a person or something?
Yeah, it's the
we
amount
need to
varies,
spread that
but
around a little bit.
Yes, and then they receive it. They're
Do I get
eligible, like you said, for a
$25
cash
if I
payment.
turn them in? I'm checking. All right, that's
So
good.
that you can go to court
So-
and bail your own kid out.
Yeah.
What's the number? You said 33%. What does that actually mean? Like, how many visits is that?
There's
What
a
is it,
total
and
of.
is it gonna be?
Yeah, there's a total of 30 full-day visits, but we can schedule those in half-day visits as well.
What was,
And-
it's gonna be, or was 30?
That's what it is now. It used to be 20 visits a year, 20 full-day
Wait,
visits a
so
year.
it was 20?
It was 20, it is now 30. And those are broken down in full and half-day visits.
Okay, and so say there's higher crime, or not crime, incidents
Mhm.
at a particular campus, does the principal have the freedom to ask for more, since like some campuses don't have the same issues as other campuses?
Yes, we schedule them usually about a month out. I work with the contractor, we schedule those about a month out. I do allow the principals, and they're aware that they can request additional visits, and then we will schedule those. But they're not aware of when those visits will take place until we show
Right,
up.
but the number of them, so if they say, I feel like I need more, there's not an issue with that, it's an automatic?
No, we can do that. And we have been responsive to the campuses that have asked for it.
Okay.
Yes.
I would just point out as well, but in that vein, we look at, the number of reports we have each month from our different campuses. So we do work with our campuses, but at the same time, when we talk about scheduling the K-9 units, Mr. Warren was looking at, we're seeing an increase here, and so we're proactive in saying, let's go ahead and weekly schedule the K-9 visits at a half-day basis at this area. So it's not simply just a campus request, we're being proactive in that as well.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wait, but I had some, so that was just with the vaping, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
then we're going to go into,
Well, that's closed session. The next one?
this report?
Yes.
This is closed session? Okay. So Lieutenant Segura is going to be there? Okay. So we can ask any questions about that. But I guess I kind of wanted mine to be open session questions. So I don't know what we're going to be discussing back there, I guess. Is it specific things?
We're going into closed session for the safety and security update.
The safety and security update.
Now, if you've got a question on the data, what we normally get, that information there, he can answer those questions now.
Okay, so I guess that's more of what I'm,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
So, I guess I had some questions about, I've been doing quite a few campus tours this summer.
Yes, ma'am.
And so and I've gotten a pretty good feel of, some campuses have different needs, right? All across the whole gamut, but specifically on security. For example, ones that stick out to me are Terry High School, George Ranch High School, and Arredondo Elementary. And so my question was, for example, Arredondo has a couple of homes across the street, some boys' homes, and so I kind of learned a few things about some issues that were going on there. And so I was curious as to if we're up to, our numbers are appropriate security-wise for that campus. And then, for example, on George Ranch, we have portables. And when I was doing the tour, I was asking some questions, and I didn't feel a sense of security out there with the portables. Also, that the numbers at Foster High School are about the same with, as far as I understand, of security, but George Ranch has about 800 more students or so. And so I know Terry High School, okay, and then Terry was different, it was also with the portables as well.
Right.
And so my question was, as far as security, do we have is it adequate per our numbers and per ratios, like standards? I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, so I'm going to get it out before I forget it. But
Already got it.
I know with the new, with Randall High School opening up and the new junior high, is it a possibility if we have extra security, since Terry and George Ranch are going to be feeding into these new schools and will eventually need security at those schools? Arredondo, I don't know if there's going to be a new school that feeds into it or not, but is it possible to get more security there because of the lack of security with the portables? And I know the changes are coming. And then when the numbers go down, then they feed into the new schools.
Yes, ma'am, I understand what you're saying. And this year, I am starting fully staffed. I will be starting with 18 total, 15 SROs, 2 sergeants, and myself, lieutenant. I did not have a red track rover, which I call the Arredondo track. Even though they fall in the maroon track, they're closer to the red track. I did not have a rover for that track, and the maroon track rover was so busy, I kept her over there by the maroon track. I'm starting with one this year, who will be covering Arredondo for those reasons. I know the group homes that you're talking about and discussing. The same thing with the portables. Myself and Sergeant Clark went and checked the portables today at Terry and George Ranch. By request of the principals, any advice that we could give them because they had the same concerns. Some of the camera placement that's out there in those areas need to be moved. We told them there's some cameras that are facing dead spots. Students can go right underneath the cameras and it's not picking them up, but we were able to take our computers out there and pull up the cameras at that time and show them live time, look, these are your dead spots, this is what needs to be covered. They have gotten with their security team. We are working closely with security also ourselves to make sure that they know that what their duties are during the day. It's not just going to be staying inside because we do have numerous campuses with portables that we will need to be checking. Could we use more officers? Definitely. Everybody could use more officers. We could use more teachers. We could use more skills. But it's a balance point. I look at NASRO. NASRO says 1 per 1,000, but you read further down, it says unless you have a security team in place. We do have a security team in place also that complements the SRO division. And now we have safety and security with Mr. Warren, who oversees them and has policy and procedures for what they're supposed to be doing daily. So it kind of helps us out. I understand what you're saying about George Ranch being a little overcrowded. Yes, there's a lot of students there. My Sergeant Clark, will be there part-time along with Officer Armstrong. Bub is the rover out there in the maroon track, and I have Officer Cruz out at Reading Junior High. So, I mean, it's some changes that we've had to make. We're going to have it covered. I always have it covered. And we always do what we have to accomplish our mission at the end of the day.
So when students are going out to at Terry or George Ranch, when the students are going out, when they're in the portables, and when they go to the bathroom, they are out in the open, and there's nobody watching them, and there's no gates. There's free access to the students, and the students are free to walk into the parking lot or go wherever, correct?
That's true, but there is a 12th grade office at Terry High School, which houses the counselors, the secretaries, and the principal that's actually facing that door and the new restrooms that were put out there. And we were talking with Mr. Yonk today, who's one of the APs at Terry. He will have one as security or a police officer out there during class changes. Now it is open during regular school, so that's why we went and discussed the camera placement with him. You know, you want to find out who's walking out during class, those cameras need to be placed in a certain area.
So if somebody's walking in to do harm.
The same way. We're looking at office placement for some of our security, and so they would be in that area at that time because there's only one entrance in the 300 hall that's going to be open to the portable buildings. So there's one set of doors, which is 2 doors right there.
But can anybody walk up from the parking lot or any other area?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's no protection when they're walking around?
No, that's one of the options that we have to look at is either putting the key cards for the students or something, but I mean, still, someone can blend in, someone can knock on the door, and we've seen students open it for them. That's something that we just have to be vigilant and talk with our administrative security team with.
But I guess maybe I'm not explaining myself well. So if a student is walking between the portables and somebody's coming up to do harm, they have free access to the student?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's no protection there?
There's no fence or anything around it.
Okay. So that is where I'm highly concerned at those 2 campuses for sure. And so, to me, a camera is not, if we're, like I said, if we're going to already have to train security at the new campus, is there room in the budget, like at the budget meeting on August 1st, I think that was the date, we talked about a $323,000 something.
I remember it.
You know what I'm talking about? Somebody knows what I'm talking about. Is there room in a budget to hire security out of those funds? I can't remember exactly what it was, that number. Somebody in this room. Nobody's owning up to it at this point, but.
I remember it, Joy.
Okay, John remembers. So anyway, I understand pointing a camera somewhere, but that's not stopping anybody. But
But there is
From, you know,
a lot of our campuses that kids are walking from building to building and there's not fences around, especially at the high school level.
When you're in the front.
Yeah,
and
but
you
in the
have
back too,
access.
like at Foster, they walk from building to building and.
In the back, right?
Yeah, but.
Across the,
But-
that's correct.
From
I
Reading
mean,
to
they're
Georgia
not
Ranch.
fenced
And
in
I-
necessarily. I mean, it's
There is another
unfortunate,
thing.
but.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm just,
I mean,
I'm letting
all the
y'all know I'm
campuses are though, Ms.
uncomfortable with
Williams.
the lack of security there.
Yeah, and like I said, we could always, yes, anybody could use more people, yes, we could
So
definitely use more.
if there's the 323,000, I'll have to find it since nobody's remembered.
I remember what you're talking about. There was that extra money, that extra.
Like on the the security team committee, when we talked about that. So that's what I'm asking, like, we said that money was available for things like this. So is it possible if we have new ones, we train them and then when the ratios go down, we can filter them out to the new high school or junior high? Is that a possibility?
I think when you're speaking about Senate Bill 11 and the allotment funding, I think we were legislatively compliant when Jill was setting the budget, which has not been adopted yet. She placed it in the safety and security budget.
Okay.
But to the point that Mr. Hunt made, it can be used for mental health services, whole child health and wellness, and so technically that money has been legislatively placed in the appropriate place legally, but it has not been allocated for a specific purpose yet.
So we can allocate it for a specific purpose?
The district, working with the school board, can set priorities in terms of if they want that money to go for hardening the schools or to go for whole child health and wellness.
Okay.
And this is going to continue in closed session, is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
Yes, and I think
Because I have a lot of
it's time to go to closed session because some of these people have to get and go to work tomorrow. So at this time, we will adjourn to closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.082. It is now 9:40. 10:29, we are back in open session, and if there's nothing else right now, we'll adjourn till Thursday. Thank you.